Afternoon from my current location here in South Korea to wherever you all are in the world. I am the creative Contessa, and today we will once more have another wonderful medieval sewing party. So as usual, I'm just going to ask everyone to please confirm that you can actually hear me properly. We think we may have addressed the sound issues, but you know, who knows? Who knows? So today, first, of course, I'm going to start with my traditional getting dressed. Today, I shall be dressing alla Fiorentina in the 1480s style. And then we're going to continue finger loop braiding because I'm still making the materials for my new reta, that little hairnet. I did a short on this and we talked about it last week. So I'm going to be remaking this with all my new skills and learnings from when I made this 17 years ago. And so I still need to do lots of finger loop braiding for that. So we'll be doing that together today. I've got a bunch of fascinating books on medieval living history. Finger loop braiding as we speak. Great. Condottiero, shouldn't you be at a graduation ceremony or something like that? I think. Can I do math? Yeah. Or something like that. Yeah, so I've got some really fun books, and I'm going to talk about my getting dressed process as we go through it. So if you have questions, just pop them in that live chat. If you are watching from Zoom or from Twitch, unfortunately, I cannot see the comments there. So if you would like to actually interact with me, I would ask that you switch over to YouTube. It's just, unfortunately, the way the software works. Apparently, TikTok and Twitch don't play well with Restream when it comes to actually engaging in the chat. But if you just want to, generally watch and interact in that manner, then, stay where you are. Okay, technical stuff over. So I am wearing my underlayer, which is the camicia. This is made of a pretty fine linen. It's almost handkerchief weight, not quite, but almost. And I read the Tudor Tailor. I went and checked out their website because they supposedly have linen voile, which they don't. They have rami, which is nettle cloth. And they talk about how it's a good substitute because you can't get linen that fine anymore. I'm like, yes, you can. I have. For certain you can. Anyway, so it's a very fine linen. It has wide-ish sleeves. They're pretty wide, actually. And something I realized after making this, you don't actually need to have your sleeves be this wide if you want pretty white poofs coming through. So unless you want to be particularly consumptive in your camicia, it doesn't. Your sleeves really just don't have to be quite this wide. And it is made with geometric construction, which means that we have rectangles, 2 rectangles, one front, one back. And we have a big square under in the armpit for an armpit gore. And that's what creates this draping that several of you have commented on. That's what creates the shaping. There are no curves cut anywhere into this garment whatsoever. The neckline is cartridge pleated all the way around, front and back. And of course, the front is lower than the back is, just like my gown. Okay, so sorry, just looking over at the comments, which are over here. Next layer is the camora. And this is my famous pink wool camora. There is an entire 2-hour, 15-minute project vlog on making this from beginning to end, and the getting dressed process and dressing in this ensemble all the way through to all the layers with a lady in waiting actually helping me. So, at these little medieval sewing parties, you get a quick and dirty version, which involves me cutting a lot of corners because I can't do the things that my damsels can do with my hair and whatnot. But if you want to see the full beautiful version, check out my full-length getting dressed videos. So this is a trick, when you have big poofy sleeves like this, right, you gather it up. And no, in the 15th century, they were not putting cuffs on their shirt sleeves. I don't know why. They hadn't figured it out yet. They didn't want to do it for whatever reason. I mean, I did kind of figure out that if you're a working woman, a servant or something, a wide sleeve without a cuff is really easy to roll up and maybe pin up to your gown like this if you're washing dishes. I don't know. It's a thought I had. Otherwise, what I do is I just gather this up into my hand like that, hold it, keeping a fist, right? And I kind of make my fist into an arrow so that it can fit through, so I'm not going quite broad through the sleeve. Put it through, pull it on. And then I do the same for the other sleeve. gather, push through. And yes, this is certainly much easier with a damsel or a family member or a friend, depending on your station in life. I normally have damsels, or I have a condottiero, but I have no one. And the cats, as adorable as they are not very useful for, well, anything really, other than being cute and morale boosting. So adjust, 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 and then we shall lace it up. This is a Fingerloop braided silk lace. And this is a 5-bow lace, actually, made of brown silk. And for those of you who haven't seen the getting dressed process before, this is the same kind of lace that men would use in their garments as well, and also that they would use to point their armor onto their arming garments and to itself. Same kind of laces they would use in their mail, in their falds, pretty much everywhere. And I have a detailed beginner tutorial on Fingerloop braiding on the channel for making actually a really pretty one called the Green Dorge. And I have given more detailed instruction on other Fingerloop braids in previous live streams, complete with overhead view so you can see what my hands are doing on all sides. But I will not be doing the overhead camera angle today. So this is what's called spiral lacing. And I know many of you have heard this before, but I'll say it again. It's basically like whip stitching the gown shut. But this gown is not designed to close. It is designed to be open in a fetching V so that you can see the snowy white of my camicia, my shirt, my smock, as it's called in 15th century English. And it's curved to actually fit to the curve of my bosom. So it's not a straight V on the fabric, it's a curved V, which if you watch the project vlog, you can see the layout of the pieces. It's a pattern that I designed. A lot of you ask me if I can recommend a commercial pattern. I can say I've heard good things about Margot Anderson's patterns for this particular era. I've not used them myself because I make my own patterns, so I don't use commercial patterns. At least not for medieval clothing. I have used commercial patterns for more modern things, but not a lot. I usually just end up draping or drafting, creating my own. So you can see the pattern that I created for this gown if you go check out that project vlog. I also posted detailed pictures of the pattern pieces on my Patreon. Unfortunately, it's not really possible to save documents to my YouTube Facebook community. So that's usually an extra perk I'm able to offer for my patrons that I just don't have the capability of offering for my channel members is documents. So I guess I could think about it. I guess I could post the pictures in Drive and post a special Drive, post the link to the Drive. I don't know why YouTube hasn't glommed on to the idea of having a document section, a digital document section for channel members, but they haven't. And I'm using a lacing bodkin here. This is actually made of twisted metal, and it's a replica of a lacing bodkin that's actually found on one of Ghirlandaio's portraits that looks very much like this dress. So Kate Ramsey sells these on Etsy. She's not a channel sponsor. I love her work. I'm very, very happy with these lacing bodkins. I think they were about $5 each. Remember, it's a handmade item. It's not some cheap made in China on machine kinds of thing. It's a single craftswoman making a single piece. Okay, so yeah, I see there might be questions about the wool. Yeah, so this is a wool gown. And it is very comfortable in the heat. Wool breathes very well in hot and humid conditions. The reason most people think wool is hot is because the only wool they've ever been exposed to is either like an army blanket, which is woven in a very specific way to be maximally heat retentive, or winter coats, which again, that wool is boiled, and that closes up the gaps in the weave, which makes it, again, intensely heat retentive, and that's on purpose. But most wool isn't boiled like that. Most wool is not processed to the point where there's no gap between the, well, minimal gapping between the threads and the weave, therefore retaining all heat possible. Wool itself is a breathable natural fiber that is really suitable for all kinds of conditions. And that's why historically in the Mediterranean, they had linen, but they also wore a lot of wool. People don't realize that. They don't imagine the ancient Greeks wearing wool chitons, but they did. Lots of them, in fact. Okay, so this sleeve here. It laces up to about mid forearm, and then there's a nice little opening where pretty poofy white can come, or pretty white can puff through, right? Really alluringly. And then of course you have these areas here where more white can show through. This is obviously easier with someone assisting, but I'm demonstrating it is entirely possible to do it on your own, to lace up your sleeves. It's not my favorite thing. I really do prefer to have people bustling about me, but there it is. The audio is strangely out of sync. Huh. Okay. Interesting. What on earth is going on, I wonder? Okay. Everyone, I have no idea what's going on with the audio. Unfortunately, I don't have a way of really resetting the live stream without starting it all over again, and that would take a little while to set up. Let me see. Hold on. Fortunately, without the microphone, well, let's see what happens. There are demons that haunt me when it comes to technology. I don't know. There's a reason I do medieval living history, and it's not because modern technology and I get along super well. I understand modern technology. I have no problem working with it. I'm good at troubleshooting. But I think modern technology detects my resentment and punishes me. Having issues with my website now too. And connecting Zoom to experiences. So let me know if that, let me know why there is a delay. By the way, Brian, I think you can log in as me and actually moderate if you need to, because I think you need to. Yeah. Right. So sleeves are all done up. By the way, just so you know, there's one layer under this, and then there's stockings under that. So, yeah. Okay, so that is the gown all laced up. Sleeves are all laced up, and now is the point at which I just sort of tuck. So I take the lace and I tuck the excess lace into the sleeve, and then you know what, Condottiero? I think I can make you a moderator even from your own channel. But remember to do that next time. Or I think I can make you a moderator full stop for the channel, and then you can just do everything from your own account. Because there are just some nasty people out there who need to be spanked hard. But I'm as sweet as light. Okay, so here we go. Princess Fiona, but in red. Hello, Megan. Welcome. Thank you for joining. Looks like I fixed it. That's great. Okay, well, yeah. So unfortunately, that means the microphones are not working. So the sound quality is probably more echoey now, and I apologize for that. Oh, thank you. Yeah, this is one of my replica tapestries. I have lots of these in storage. I have about 88 of them, I think. Bought on eBay for really bargain prices. This is actually linen and wool, and it's hand silk screen. It's about 60 or 70 years old, this replica of La Dama la Licorne series. Yep. Yeah, trolls should hopefully will get the karma they deserve. Yeah. You know what's funny though? Trolls are cowards because they hide behind the anonymity of the internet, but they would never say those things to my face, because if they did, yeah, they wouldn't have much of a face left. Oh, you're going to Daegu. Cool. What's bringing you to Daegu, Pancake? It's getting a little warm here. Okay, so next hair. I'm going to divide my hair into braids. Actually, today's going to be a really simple thing. And many of you have asked, what do you do with those tests, those finger loop braiding tests? Well, this is what I use them for. So when I do my little finger loop braiding samples, either for a class or for testing out a new braid or a new material, I keep those short pieces and then I can use them to actually cap off my braids. So as I see, I don't know that sliver. No. I was worried this was going to happen. So this tripod broke like just as I was setting up, and all my tripods are occupied by other equipment right now. It's very frustrating. Okay, there we go. Now that sliver of light is no longer weirdly coming in. So I'm just going to braid my hair into 2 pigtail braids, basically 2 3-strand braids. And because I could test out doing hair taping on myself, but I don't know if I want to do that with people watching because it's probably going to be embarrassing. So I'm just going to do a 3-strand braid, and then I'm going to cap it off with some of my finger loop braiding. And I do that. I don't just, when you're using a tie like this to tie off a braid, you just don't wrap it around the end. It will probably fall out. Not necessarily, but probably, especially if you're active like I am. So I actually braid it into the last little bit of the braid, and then I tie it off, and then it stays in no matter what I do. So I dance and I bounce and I walk and I go up and down stairs, and I'm very, very active in my medieval life as in my modern life. So everything needs to be a little extra sturdy with me. Let's see if I can bring that up. Show you. And this is all going to get covered by a coif, so I care less about how it looks than I might if it were going to show. So same thing here, 3-strand braid. Braid. And we get down. And then again, once I get towards the end, I go ahead and braid in the tie for a couple of turns of the braid and then tie the whole thing off. And if this were going to actually show, I probably want matching braids so that they're at least the same colors, but this is all going to get buried under a coif. In fact, the coif, for those who are interested, I'll show you the coif I'm going to put on. I'm actually offering a workshop tomorrow for all of us, I guess, mostly, on how to make it. Okay, so my quick and dirty messy bun, medieval messy bun, is this. And this is definitely something that so there's 2 options. The medieval option is actually especially ladies who are depicted doing any kind of practical thing. Their hair is just kind of over top like this, right? And that's one option. There's also an option where I just take the braids and tie them around the back of my head. Okay, so today I'm going to be putting on what many people call a milkmaid coif, but is not a milkmaid coif. This is a kerchief or a couvre-chef, and it is referenced, we think it's referenced anyway as such in the 15th century English inventories. It's in the French inventories a couvre-chef, it's a cuffia in Italian, right? They don't necessarily specify the shape of any of these kinds of things, so you have to assume that they're talking about this thing we see in the paintings. And it goes on really easily. So I just put it on like this. Right? Frames my face like this. Okay, and then I bring the kerchief part of the kerchief forward like this. And I just twist the ends like this. Twist, twist, twist. And I twist inward and I counter twist them. So one is being torqued counterclockwise, the other is being torqued clockwise. until I can feel it tightening on the back of my head, like so, right? And then I have two options. I can cross it in the back. And if I had a bun, I would do that. I guess I can do this. Or you can just bring it straight up. This one has ties that are long enough that I can cross it in the back, like so. But you don't have to. You could just bring it straight up the sides as well. Okay, and then you can fold it back. If I were out in daylight, I would probably leave this brim forward because it helps keep the sun out of my eyes and off of my face a little bit. Also helps keep you cooler in hot weather. Or cuffed back like this for what everyone calls the milkmaid look. But milkmaids are not the ones who dressed like this in the medieval period. All ladies in sort of France and England wore something like this. I haven't really seen Italian women wearing it, but because I'm about to offer a workshop on this and because I don't have anyone that really helped me with my hair here, we're going for this option today. So if you're interested in making this coif, it's very simple. It's a great beginner project. I'm offering a workshop on that. It is pay what you will, so you just enter the amount you're willing to pay for the workshop. It's via Zoom, live. Thecreativecontessa.com. If my condottiero is there, he can put it in the chat. It's 3 sessions, 2 hours over the next 3 Saturdays in the Western Hemisphere, Sunday morning in the Eastern Hemisphere, and I teach you everything you need to know. We go through it step by step together. I teach you how to draft, basics hand stitching techniques, everything. And at the end of the workshop, you will walk away with this because it's via Zoom. Everything will be recorded. So if you miss anything or you need to review, you can review the recording for as long as Zoom exists or as long as YouTube exists, because I post the recordings in a special private link on YouTube. Okay, so people back then smelled a little different. Let me see, questions. Yeah, so these things, this kind of coif, this was never, in the 15th century, they were not yet, at least this kind was definitely not decorated. This is a working coif. This is a casual at-home coif. Noble ladies would wear these in the privacy of their chambers. Working women would wear them out and about, literally doing the most dirty work you can imagine, out in the fields, milking the cows, cleaning, doing housework, right? But the idea is it keeps the sun off of your head and it keeps the dirt out of your hair, right? And no, people didn't smell a little different. Well, yes, they smelled different because they didn't cover themselves in artificial smells. People were actually very clean in the Middle Ages. And that brings me to a good point about busting medieval myths. So tomorrow and the next several Sundays, Sundays my time because I'm in Korea, Saturdays most of your time, Philip from Irish Medieval History and I will be getting together and we will be discussing and busting some of the most egregious myths about medieval life. Amongst them, people smelled bad because they didn't, not any more than people now smell bad. Now, what did smell bad were the cities. The cities outright were disgusting. They just were. There's no question. I will not even debate you. People at the time observed that the cities smelled bad. So it's not even a question. People, however, bathed regularly. They washed themselves all the time, and there are all sorts of recipes for adding lavender and sweet-smelling herbs into your wash water, into powders for the hair, into powders that go on the body. So medieval people did not smell bad. Big bad myth. That's a Victorian myth, not reflected in actual real history. Not any more than, people can smell bad today. Some people do, most people don't. Okay, so any questions about Mistress V? Welcome back. Thank you for joining us today. Any questions about the camorra? So this is called a gamora in Florentine or a camorra. It's called different things in other places. Vestito in some parts of Italy. So, depending on where you are, this might have a different name in the 15th century because the dialects of Italian that are spoken across the peninsula were almost different enough to almost be not mutually intelligible depending on which 2 dialects you're talking about. Yeah. Twitchy Witch for embroidery, probably not a coif. We have examples of, in Germany, they did sprang insets, but not really embroidery. It's not until the Yeah, so in Italy, there's a couple of really sort of nicer coifs that you could absolutely make that are pretty damn fancy. Yeah, but not this kind. Not this kind at all. Yeah, definitely fancier ones in Italy. Pearls and complicated embroidery, gold work. You know, the whole three-dimensional 9 yards, as it were. Yeah. Okay. Right. Let me see. The ammonia from urine was used as washing for clothing. Absolutely. Urine. So urine in the Middle Ages was like the Swiss Army knife of materials. It was used for so many things. It was used for bleaching your clothing. It was used for defatting wool as part of the weaving process, defatting, removing the lanolin. It was a universal solvent, so they used it to wash lots of things, including, by the way, armor. It was used with a mixture of sand and vinegar and urine, but fermented, not straight up urine, everyone. You have to ferment it first. So you can't just take urine and use it to clean stuff. That's not going to work. You need to let it ferment to really get maximum ammonia production. Yeah, no, urine absolutely was heavily used, but the smell goes away. It evaporates. And that's why they added lavender to a lot of things that were where urine was being used. Okay. Jessica, thank you for joining us today. And everyone, don't forget to hit that thumbs up. Don't, I know if you're commenting, you've subscribed, but if you're actually enjoying this kind of content and you want to see more of me discussing medieval living history, medieval daily life, I have long format videos. I've got lots of shorts. I do lots of live streams. Then check out my channel and subscribe. Okay, so today I'm going to be making more finger loop braiding for my new reta, as we think they were called in Italian. And this is possibly a kind of coif-like thing that maybe was only worn by young unmarried women, but maybe not. If the evidence is still out on that. So I still like it. Even when my hair is in a nice coil on the back of my head, I still like to wear one of these. I think they're cute. So I'm going to be making a new one. And today we're going to be doing a lace bend finger loop braid. Now this is different than the thin lace of 5 boas. And for those of you who want to explore more about the technique we're going to be doing today, the crafting technique we're going to be doing today, there is a book that is very accessible. Take 5 Bows Departed. And unfortunately, I forgot to mirror the screen. Or I forgot to unmirror the screen, so it's mirroring it. And so any of you who are Da Vinci fans, you might appreciate the fact that the writing is backwards. So Take 5 Bows Departed by Elizabeth Benz and Gina Barrett. Go to their website. Don't buy from Amazon, please. Don't support that piece of garbage, Bezos. Go to their website directly and you can order it. There's been a new edition since I got this many years ago. And this has 41 reconstructed original 15th century braids. So there's a finger loop braiding, as it's called modernly, was called lace making in medieval English. They refer to this as the making of laces. This predates bobbin lace. Bobbin lace is a 16th century invention. And the reason that bobbin lace got the name it did was because it adopted this word. And that's because there are, for instance, braids that make things like this, which look very lacy, right? So that's how the term for lace, like these kinds of laces, like your shoelaces, eventually became the frilly, doily like things that go on the edges of garments, right? And that are now on lingerie, right? That's because originally the technique for making such frilly, pretty things was what we're going to do today. And it was called lace making and had been called lace making since the 13th century when the technique, when the French that came from the French, actually, lacer. So the braid we're going to be doing today, that I'm going to be doing to fill in the cross pieces of this. So here we have, so I've already made the pieces for the long pieces that go over my head, but now the pieces that go in between, the cross hatching, we're going to be doing a lace called a lace bend. And this is a big fat version of it with 2 colors, so you can see it easily. But I'm only going to be doing it in 1 color, just in gold silk thread. Gold colored, not actual gold. Silk thread that is gold colored, right? So this is what we're going to be making today, but I'm going to be doing it in the very fine blister inducing 22 width silk thread. So yeah, it's This will, if when you start working with thread this thin and you're doing lace making, as it's called in the 15th century, you will probably develop blisters. So just accept that. So the first thing we're going to do is spool up my loops. And by spool up, I mean warp up. So we have to wrap thread into loops. And to do that, I actually set up 2 chairs facing each other. And I know you can't really get it back up the camera so you can see better. Get a little broader view. Okay, at least some of it. Yes. Okay. So you just need 2 points, any 2 points that are solid. And we're going to actually wrap our thread around this to create our loops. That means I'm going to be creating hilly pig loops. So this is going to be a while to braid this. So thankfully, I think the kitties went back to sleep. They had a hard morning playing like this was some kind of Hunger Games set. So I'm hoping they've exhausted themselves. So basically, I need 8 loops for this, 8 bows as they're called. And if you want to make this with 2 and have it be 2 cool colors kind of twisting on each other, no problem. You just need 4 laces, 4 bows in each color. We call them loops modernly. Back then they called them bows. Right. And when you're wrapping your thread, you just don't want it to be too tight. Yarn, thread, whatever, it all has a kind of natural pull to it, a natural stretch. So when you're wrapping, you do want to keep it tight-ish, but you don't want to pull and stretch it abnormally. Because then that stretch, you'll have some loops, some bows will be longer than others. So you don't want that. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. Basically, I'm making a package of bows. 7, 4. Okay, 8. Great. So when you reach the end, you want to make sure you leave enough to tie a knot. So you don't want to waste too much, especially not on silk thread. But you want to leave enough on the ends to actually tie a knot. Scissors are here. So I cut, and then I'm going to tie a knot, and then I'm going to take the ends, the dangling ends of the knot, and I'm going to actually use those to make a packet, a bundle. Now this technique, the basic technique, what we now call finger loop braiding as it was lace making, we have 42 different braids that are documented in 2 different 15th century manuals that in detail, and I mean really good detail, describe the process of making these laces. And they all kinds of different ones, including 2-person braids. My condottiero and I actually did 2 videos demonstrating 2-person braids in the live stream. If you go check out live streams, you can see us doing 2-person laces. And so you can get really complicated. Some really pretty patterns. There's lots of different options. You have chevrons, and you have them too far from the camera to actually show you. So there's all kinds of shapes and really ornate ones. One that I do in my paid finger loop braiding workshops, my advanced one, is a 46-step 46-step braid. It's pretty intense. Okay, so now we have our loops, and we're going to anchor them to this chair, in fact, right here. And I'm actually going to put a weight on it, a 30-pound weight on it once I've anchored it, because the thing I don't want to have happen, I don't want my anchor point to move. uh, because you need something against which you can reliably pull. I had an anchor thread already cut out, but it apparently went away. So you want a piece of furniture against which you can pull. That could be a cabinet, for instance. I generally use cabinets, but there's no cabinets in the filming area. um, it could be a table leg, for instance, is very common. You can also actually attach it to your toe if your loops are short enough. Um, or yeah, if because you need to be able to pull your arms all the way open. Although I guess if you actually attach it to your toe, you could then use your foot to tighten the pattern down. But I prefer to stand when I'm finger loop braiding. I'm not very fond of sitting in general, so anything that allows me to stand when I'm working is great. And if you want to make really, really long finger loop braids, really long laces, then it's a two-person operation for a one-person braid because you need someone to stand really far away with a stick and actually beat the pattern down, tighten the pattern for you as the person, player number two, is back there actually working the loops. And you'll see what I'm talking about. Okay, so I'm anchored. I've put a piece of yarn in there, and now I'm going to tie this to my anchor chair, as I'm calling it. And tip for those of you who are getting into the fine medieval art of lace making, more is more when it comes to your anchor. You want a more solid, more steady anchor than less. So I actually make a longer anchor and I wrap it around several times, my anchor point. Okay, question. Did the colors have to be more muted for people of lower classes as opposed to those of upper classes? Just wondering. That's a great question. So it's funny. There are sumptuary laws, but they are less about, depending on where you are, right? So remember everyone, medieval Europe is absolutely not a monolith. The Middle Ages is 1,000 years of history as per historian definitions, and things change and evolve pretty rapidly, actually, more rapidly than people would like to believe. So I can answer you for specific places, right? Different places have different sumptuary laws. In first millennium Ireland, under the Brehon laws, certain colors were absolutely reserved for certain classes of people, like kings could only wear purple, for instance. But that changes over time depending on where you are. So it's not about muted colors. It's actually the laws aren't about the muted colors. The laws are about the dye stuff. In many places because it's about conspicuous consumption. And what's happening, especially after the Black Death, but even a little bit before that, but especially after the Black Death, suddenly you have all these upstart the middling sort are getting wealthy because there's all this opportunity after such a massive die-off for peasants to actually assert their own, for tradesmen to start demanding more money for wages and to sell their products for a more expensive price. So laws start being passed kind of all across different polities in Europe that say that, if you can only wear crimson kermes, like actual proper red dyed with kermes, if you're of a certain social class, or if you are worth a certain amount of money per year, like you have to be a knight worth 100 pounds a year. If you want to have shoes with pikes longer than 2 inches, pikes are the long pointed toes. So it's not so much about, it's not a question of that lower classes had to, it's a question of expense. And the thing is that really bright, vibrant colors like this generally require a lot more dye stuff than a muted color, because muted colors are usually the result of the exhaust bath in dyeing, and the exhaust bath is what's left in the dye bath after you dye something. So after you dye a length of wool, there's still dye stuff left in the dye bath. It's not completely exhausted. So that exhaust bath would then be used again to dye, either to do another over dye after the first layer dries, and then can go back to be remordanted and go back in, or it will just be used to dye less expensive fabric, which will then be sold to the lower classes. So muted colors, it was less a question of sumptuary legislation, of law or rules, and more a question of who could afford bright colors. Bright colors equaled expensive, which is something that's kind of hard for us to imagine in the modern world, right? That a bright color means it's more expensive, that you would actually pay more for that deep, saturated, and bright is maybe the wrong word, saturated color instead of a muted color, right? The opposite of muted is really saturated, a saturated color. So yeah, certainly the lower classes were wearing colors, but more muted, but it was a question in many cases of expense versus legislation. With the caveat that yes, there was legislation that restricted colors in some places, but more often restricted specific fabrics and furs so that, you know, these upstart middling sorts wouldn't go above their places. What are you making? Sorry, I just joined. Love your history. Oh, Amelia, thank you for joining. We're doing some more finger loop braiding today. I have my boas set up, as they're called in 15th century English. We're going to be making a lace round bend, and that is, this is a large fat version of it. Lace round bend, but I'm going to be doing this all in gold colored silk thread because I am making the laces for my new reta. I'm going to be remaking this cute little coif-like thing that you see in 15th century Florentine paintings of some young ladies. And so making the second kind of lace that will go into this. Okay, and I just realized I think I'm going to need more room. I made these laces really super long. Okay, moving you back, everyone. Oh goodness, I'm going to be partially backlit. Oh well. Okay. I think that'll do. Okay, here we go. Yeah, I forgot which one. This is an 8 loop. Yeah, so it's a lace bend, it's called. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and divide up my laces. And let's see. So basically these, each one bow in 15th century parlance goes on each finger. So this is actually not a hard one to do. I'm just going to briefly review the pattern because I was doing a different one yesterday. It's a very simple pattern. You just have to remember the order of operations. Okay. So this one is actually nice for beginners because it's just exchanges. It's not, I think probably in my, what the heck is going on down here? What did you do? Did you do laces? Ugh, I'm just gonna sacrifice the end. I don't feel like I don't feel like cleaning up the mess that is formed down here at the end. Guess I could actually move this a little more over like that. Yeah. Okay. A little more. Wave the camera. I don't want that either. Okay, so basically we have a series of exchanges. For those of you who know how to do finger loop braiding, don't drop your loops, don't drop your bows. I actually do teach these workshops professionally, and I'm probably going to be rolling out more pay what you can workshops in finger loop braiding. I'm also going to be teaching a workshop on how to make this reta, this thing that I'm talking about, and it will include 2 finger loop braiding lessons. Okay, so just start with our exchanges. And when you're doing really long loops on your own, you basically just have to use your feet. That's what I do. I use my feet if I don't have a player number 2 for long bows. Swap these. And then swap these. I'm done. We start over. So this ends up being a kind of total body workout. I've spent last night making one lace for 2 hours, and at the end, I was feeling like I had a pretty strong core. And whenever you see, it's really funny, whenever you see this art being depicted, this craft being depicted in art, rather, it's very often the Virgin Mary, the Mother of God, with, you know, homunculus baby Jesus helping her. So apparently homunculus baby Jesus was indeed omniscient. He even knew how to finger loop braid. It's pretty adorable, actually. You ever catch, so, and you'll start seeing it if you start paying attention to 15th century art and looking for the braiding baby Jesus, you'll actually start seeing it more often. The nice thing about the lace bend is that it does go pretty quickly. So it's not one of the long ones. It's not nearly as arduous as, say, the thin lace of 5 bows, or God forbid, this thin lace of 7 bows, which really takes quite a while, especially to work through if you're working with thin thread. Cat's cradle. Except that the point of cat's cradle is to undo it, right? Isn't it? Not to make beautiful braids and knots, but to undo the beautiful braids and knots, or undo a knotty thing. I actually never did cat's cradle. I don't know when I knew how to do it, I don't think. So yeah. So we will be tomorrow with Phil for Irish Medieval History. We have some fun medieval myths we're going to be busting. Tomorrow's episode is going to be focusing on armor and clothing. We're going to be talking about some of the very egregious myths about knights and their armor. For instance, that knights had to be cranked onto a horse by a winch. And we're going to be talking about some of the myths about clothing, like color. We're going to talk about the myth of the medieval kilt. We're going to talk about chastity belts. We're going to talk about colors and dirty clothes. So we've got some, and all, of course, backed up by fun primary sources to help you understand the medieval world better. And I'll be talking about various parts of mainland Europe, and Philip will be talking about Ireland. So yeah, we've got a fun program planned for you. And as always, there's the live chat feature, so we encourage people to join in. So yeah, it's looking good. Probably shouldn't have stopped mid-flow. So the problem with fingerloop braiding is if you stop mid-flow, you can sometimes forget where you were. So I always recommend get back to the beginning of the pattern before you stop and do anything. Happily, with this particular one, it's pretty forgiving. It's another reason it makes a great braid for beginners, because any mistakes don't really particularly matter in the grand scheme of creating the thing. But especially if you only work in one color, your mistakes will be much less obvious. Because this is going to be going into a garment that I'm going to be wearing on top of my head. It is very unlikely that anyone except for perhaps my damsels will notice any flaws in the finished product. And they would certainly never say anything to me. That's not true. My damsels and I are very, very close, and we rib each other on a pretty regular basis. Tomorrow's live stream is at 11 a.m. 11 a.m. Seoul time, which would be 10 p.m. East Coast time, or in the U.S. would be 4 a.m. in Central Europe, and then whatever that is, respectively, on the West Coast. Yeah, so 11 a.m. Seoul time, and then the respective other times, the other time zones. It is scheduled on my channel. If you go to lives, you can see the time, and it will actually automatically adjust for you. Okay, only on YouTube will you see the live. Unfortunately, if you're on one of the other streaming platforms, it doesn't actually schedule, it just starts streaming suddenly. Chastity belts like metal underwear with a lock on it. Well, that's what people think they could. So I'm going to give you a bit of a spoiler, give you a hint. Chastity belts did not exist in the Middle Ages. There is no actual evidence for them, and so we'll be discussing that. It seems that they were a Victorian invention. So we'll be discussing that tomorrow. But yeah, basically like metal underwear with a lock on it. And like many myths about the Middle Ages, we have the Victorians to thank. And it's the reason that a lot of museums worldwide have actually taken their chastity belts off of display, because once they started actually dating and examining the items, testing the materials, they realized that they were 19th century or 18th century, and certainly not earlier than that. So yeah, we'll be talking about that tomorrow. But yeah, that's what a chastity belt hypothetically was. Metal underwear with a lock on it. So stay tuned for all kinds of fun fun myth busting and casting a, hopefully for some of you anyway, a new light on life in the Middle Ages. The more I learn about daily life in the past, the more I realize we're not necessarily a lot better, because instead of we got rid of one set of toxic killers that we used to fill our homes with, and then just replaced it with another set of toxic killers. So, the one thing about the modern world that I will say for it, we have antibiotics. And that has certainly made a big difference in life expectancy. Yeah. Everyone always says, you want to live in the Middle Ages, don't you? No. No, I do not. I really, really do not. There are many aspects of medieval life that I love. There's some very beautiful aspects, especially at the courtly level, but even amongst the peasant class, right? Life was not short and brutish for peasants, believe it or not. So there's a lot of things I would love to take into the modern world, which is why I do medieval living history. But would I want to actually travel back? I wouldn't even want to take a time machine back and set one foot out into the medieval any place in the past, really. But especially not the Middle Ages, because there's all kinds of dangers. I mean, it's just a dangerous time. So yeah, no, no, thank you. I'm good. Yeah. Yeah, the wonders of vaccines. Yeah, baby. I am all about the vaccines. Jesus. These anti-vax people, seriously. My grandmother would have a lot of things to say about anti-vaxxers. My grandmother had polio. She contracted polio and it torqued her spine real bad. She was told she would never have grandchildren, or she would never have children. They stopped telling her that after the fifth one, but her pregnancies were horrible. They were horrible experiences for her all the way around. She still managed to have 5 children. If she had had access to the polio vaccine, and that there are people who are now refusing vaccines, talk about a privilege. Yes, there's this thing that will prevent you from being crippled forever, but you're not going to choose to not take it. Okay. My grandmother would have loved the choice. She would have, of course, taken the vaccine. Now measles and measles and mumps are making us like, oh my God, it's like this Little House on the Prairie. We're in the 19th century again. Also a century, by the way, I would definitely not want to live in. But in many ways, the 19th century was way worse than most periods in medieval, and especially late medieval Europe, later medieval Europe. I mean, wow. 19th century is a real dystopia. We're heading back towards that, so that's great. Yeah, so no, there's lots of things I love about medieval culture. I love the education. I love the way people actually, especially in courtly circles in the upper echelons, they actually had salon discussions and discussed philosophy, and they actually danced and had these all sorts of beautiful courtly rituals depending on the time of year. Armored combat was a pretty beautiful thing to behold. On the battlefield was a different story. Of course, battlefields are not the same as a list field where knights are engaging in very sort of ritualized deeds of arms. Battlefield situation is very different. Medieval warfare, especially after the advent of gunpowder, was probably extremely traumatizing. An expert, a historian on black powder, observed that probably initially when black powder weapons were introduced to the battlefield, it was the psychological horror of the explosions, that explosive sound, that probably was the most effective aspect of having black powder weapons in a battle, because they certainly weren't very accurate in terms of aiming. The range wasn't particularly wonderful either. But especially for those first generations of soldiers who are out there engaging in combat with these explosions, it was probably pretty dramatic. So yeah, nope, I don't want to travel back to the Middle Ages. Oh goodness. I realize cannot look at the I really cannot look at the comments and be very deliberate about looking at the comments. Okay. I'm now going to look at the comments. Thankfully, I hope there is a whooping cough vaccine. That's part of that's diphtheria. It's whooping cough. So yeah, there's a whooping cough vaccine, which is also making a comeback, alarmingly, right? Like this is crazy. A friend of mine actually got whooping cough, and she is vaccinated. And that's the crazy part. And she was turning blue. Her lips were blue from lack of oxygen. It's like reading an episode of House on the Prairie, but I was living it. So yeah, if you want a craft that is good for working out your whole body, I can highly recommend lace making, Fingerloop braiding modernly. So I was reading in my age of the in the Plantagenet age, which is this fantastic, it's a part of our book corner today. It's a fantastic compendium of primary sources discussing various aspects of daily life in Plantagenet England, and has a whole section on exercise. And it's funny, most people imagine that medieval people were just so that life was so rigorous that just living would keep you in shape. But apparently, by the 14th century in England, anyway, that was not the case for the upper classes. And there's actually a suggestion of exercise, different specified, very clearly described exercises for prelates and for young men and for noblemen. And yeah, this is specifically for men. It wasn't talking about women, but he's talking about things that you see at the gym all the time now. He's talking about fixing a rope and using the rope to suspend your body and climbing the rope and doing push-ups with the rope, basically like a track, for those of you who know what tracks are in the gym. And he talks about, for young men, they should wrestle, they should heave heavy stones, they should pole vault, all these things that you definitely see, especially in CrossFit gyms now. So that was a really interesting passage to read about staying in shape in the 14th century and how they had reached a level of affluence and comfort that they actually needed specific exercises to stay in shape. Obviously, for many craftsmen, they probably didn't need that, especially jobs like stonemasons, much more vigorous work. Peasants, I'm confident I would be shocked if I ever found a manual that said these are exercises we recommend for peasants. Although people don't understand what the word peasant means, it's actually the French word for a farmer, paysan, someone who kind of lives and works in the country. And so there were rich peasants. Peasant did not mean poor. Peasant just meant farmer. So there were very rich peasants, even in the Middle Ages, especially after the Black Death, when opportunities arose for land acquisition and an increase in wages. But that does mean that you're out there working the fields, most likely, at least in part. You may have people working under you, employees, no doubt, but still, you are probably also out there helping prepare the fields, harvest, and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah. Oh crap! I tried to look at the comments while I was still mid flow. Bad Contessa, no biscuit. Okay, pause and look at the. Oh yeah, Charny does out. He eviscerates tubby knights. You're right. He also eviscerates peacock knights who tight lace, who literally wear pourpoint that are so tight that it cinches their waist in well beyond the point where their natural waist is. So yeah, tight lacing in the medieval world is not for women. Tight lacing is for men, apparently, in France and England in the 14th century. Isn't that funny? Let's see. Stormy, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. I am doing a 15th century craft called lace making, modernly called Fingerloop braiding, in preparation to turn this into a ornate little sort of piece of headwear accessory for your hair. I'm not even certain how I would qualify it. It's a kind of coif for those who know what a coif is. That's made out of silk ribbon and or silk laces. At least we assume it's silk because we don't know because no extant ones have survived. But certainly in the imagery, it's usually shiny, indicating a luxurious fabric, fiber type like silk, possibly even made out of, in some cases, if it's woven narrow wears, it could absolutely be brocaded with gold or something like that. Tim, thank you for joining us. Isn't that how the Pastons started their fortune, by farming? Um, the Pastons. Yeah, it depends on how far back you go. I mean, they were merchants as far as I know. The Pastons were pretty certain they were merchants first, and then they got lands and all of that. But I could be wrong about that. I'm less interested in the early days. I'm more interested in the second half of the 15th century. So yeah, I don't know where the hell I was. I need to stop looking at the comments when I'm mid-flow. Contessa, no biscuit. Can you tell me a base? Jesse, I'm not certain what you mean by base. I might need more information than that to help you. Yeah, so there are actually two manuscripts that detail this process. One of them, they're both in the British Library, and they're part of the Harleian collection. And one of them is actually a book of secrets of Catherine Ptolemaica. And a book of secrets was a sort of personal compilation of information useful for running a household, for living daily life. So men and women had them, and they were very personalized. And none of them have the same things. And Catherine Ptolemaica thought it was important to include a lot of finger loop braids in her book of secrets. And I actually have a facsimile of it. Not the bestest facsimile. There was a printed facsimile made. I think you can buy it for £1,000 if you want. I don't have that kind of money to invest in a book at this stage of my life, but maybe someday. Yeah, and her book of secrets also has other things like how to get stains out. There's also some alchemy stuff in there, which is pretty interesting. Medicinal stuff, poultices, that kind of thing. So, books of secrets are pretty fascinating look into the sort of things, into daily life in the Middle Ages for a normal, everyday person. I mean, yes, Catherine Ptolemaica was obviously a noblewoman. I think she was a noblewoman. So yeah, we're not talking about, a beggar in the street. You need to be able to afford to have books, and books were very expensive in the Middle Ages, but still, we're not talking, Book of Secrets of the Queen of England. Granted, about 80%, even as of the 15th century, about 80% of Europe's population were peasants. So most people lived out and worked on farms, but peasanting does not mean illiterate. By the way, peasants had to keep household accounts, and many of them kept them themselves. Of course, you could pay a clerk, absolutely, to do that for you. But, a lot of peasants, especially in Italy, actually kept their own ricordanze, what is translated as a memoir, and they sort of are, but it's more than just, feelings and thoughts. It's a record of things that happen every day, but also like really prosaic, mundane things that happen every day. Like if if a a man makes an order with the local tailor, he'll actually include in the ricordanza the details of that commission. He'll talk about the fabrics, how much they were worth, the other materials that he had to send to the tailor for the making of the garment. So that also goes into these memoirs, which is why for Florence, Florence is famous for these things, which is why for Florence, the Ricordanze are an amazing and valuable source into material life in the Middle Ages and early Renaissance. Most of them have not been transcribed, let alone translated. So if you go to Florence and you go to the city archives, you can find them there in the original manuscript form. And often you can take pictures and do your own transcription and translation if you want. This may be not a skill set that everyone has, since paleography is really tricky. Yeah, I can really feel surfing the muscles in my back. Oh, Jackson, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Oh, what's the news article? I've clearly missed a whole bunch of stuff. Bring me up to speed. What interesting news article? So I actually put out there, what myths would people like us to bust in our myth busting series? And there was some really interesting misconceptions that I hadn't even realized were misconceptions or hadn't thought about in those terms. You know, that one, that Europe, medieval Europe, was religiously monolithic. That's certainly not true. First off, 1,000 years of history. Second off, Europe's a whole continent. And a lot of people don't realize that the Baltic states like Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, they were the last officially what we would call pagan holdout in medieval Europe up until the 14th century. So, you know, the rest of Europe had gone Christian. Latvia and Lithuania, not so much. So, you know, and then of course, some ones I hadn't thought about because I didn't realize people thought that. For example, that the white wedding dress is a medieval tradition. It's not. That the wedding veil is a medieval tradition. It's also not. At least not in the Christian version of wedding traditions. So yeah, it was very interesting to see what people were posting. And we will be pretty much covering them all, but we realize we're going to have to do multiple series to get through all of these myths because there are just so many bad myths out there. It's kind of remarkable, you know, that everyone was dirty, that smelled bad, that castles were cold and drafty, and, you know, unappealing living spaces. A lot of this is bullcrap that the Victorians spread because they wanted to feel superior to their ancestors. When in many ways, society had taken a big backward slide during the Victorian era, especially with the rise of factories and the abuses of labor. I mean, we broke ourselves in so many ways with factories. The forced sleeping schedules, the long shifts, the deadly working conditions. Yeah, not super great. The kind of isolation created, turning people from people into capital, that's never good. Take a living human and you view them only as a thing that creates value or doesn't create value. It's a terrible way to live life. You know, there's a lot of positives about medieval life. For instance, in many places throughout Europe, when it was a saint's feast day, the lord whose land you worked would actually host a feast for you at his expense, or the lady would at her expense if it was properties owned and managed by a lady. And that would be a real holiday. You would dance, you would sing, you'd play games, be abundant amounts of food. And in the industrial era, that all stopped. So it wasn't all drudgery and horror. You clicked on my channel and got lost on my shorts. It's cool, Amelia. Welcome back. I totally respect people wandering to other parts of my channel and then coming back again. Yeah, I know it, Garu, I know it looks like a string from your perspective. because it's fine silk, but it's actually basically a kind of braid, and it will eventually be turned into a decorative headpiece, is the best way I could explain it in modern terms. Oh, I forgot to bling up. I specifically set out one of my armor and castings pendants to put on, and then I forgot to do that. I got straight into lace making. Well, too late now, at least until I'm done with this one. So the unfortunate aspect about this method of lace making versus, say, tablet weaving is that you can't really put it down and come back to it unless you have two sets of hands, like hand sculpture, or like the hands you would use for art class, where you can position the fingers, right? The articulated hands, because you have to put the loops exactly on the fingers where the loops currently are. And if you want to actually restart in exactly the spot in the braid where you stopped. Because if you just drop the loops, because of the torque that's been placed on them through this process, they will twist up and around themselves and you'll never figure out where you actually were. It's unlikely you're going to actually pick up exactly where you left off with everything twisted in the right way. So if you're by yourself and you don't have someone to hold the loops for you, your bows for you, your choices are drop the loops and just accept there will be a flaw in it, or commit and finish the thing before you go and do anything else. This also means you might need to think about things like any kind of bathroom needs that could occur in the middle of your process. That's something else people ask me, actually, especially, well, not necessarily me because I'm never in armor, but they ask about knights, or they don't realize about knights who are in full harness. How can they relieve themselves? One of the theories is that knights would actually that medieval people in general, especially men, would train their bodies to have a specific rhythm. You know, your time for certain bodily functions is in the morning before getting dressed, and in the evening after getting undressed, and that's it. And that seems pretty reasonable, especially towards the 15th century, the 14th and 15th century and 16th century, when you're lacing your hosen into your doublet, and it's not necessarily easy to unlace your hosen from your doublet on your own. So the other theory is that people were never alone, so there was always someone who could help you with your ties. Knights, on the other hand, you're not going to remove any part of your armor in mid-combat to handle certain operations, or even mid-feat of arms. So the theories about that are less salubrious than the one I just mentioned. I heard one knight talking about how he's pretty certain that knights just urinated on themselves in the middle of battle, and like almost self-cleaning armor, I guess. I haven't seen any primary source evidence of that, so I'm not certain how true that is. But on the other hand, if you're in the thick of battle and you have to do something, you're just going to do it. You're definitely not in a medieval battlefield going to stop, go relieve yourself, and come back. That's not going to happen. So maybe he's right. But I seem to have missed something in the comments. What did we see today that you can't get to me because you're in Idaho and I'm in South Korea? Yes. Uh-oh. I stopped mid-flow. That's on me. Yeah, this one's going to have a lot of little errors in it. I enjoy fingerloop braiding with you guys, but I'll be honest, it's hard for me to stay focused on the braid and get it all perfect and right. Again, I care about less for this particular application. There are some braids where you're going to have a big, very visible flaw if you don't do it perfect. One of the ones I do for my advanced workshop, a lace indentured, is one such lace. 46 step one I've mentioned several times. If you make a mistake, it's very visual. So I'm assuming that, professional silk women were just so good because they just did this for hours and hours a day. They just didn't make any kind of flaws, any mistakes. I mean, especially if your materials, because silk is super expensive in the Middle Ages. So if your materials cost a lot, there's a lot more incentive for perfection, you know. And it was silk women who made these. So I haven't found any evidence of men doing the lace making, as it were. I'm not saying it didn't happen. I just haven't seen the evidence for it. For certain, there were silk women who did this professionally. They probably did not just do, oops, they probably did not just do silk laces. They probably also did tablet weaving, other kinds of narrow wears. But they were very often part of a guild. They had their own businesses. They trained their own apprentices. We have these records. We have apprentice contracts. People imagine that medieval women were stay-at-home wives. I think could be further from the truth. I mean, for one, the the idea of the home being separate from where you work is a post-medieval concept, because in the Middle Ages, most people lived where they worked. They had a shop, then they lived above the shop. If they worked in a shop, they generally slept in the shop because that was part of their remuneration package, especially if they were an apprentice. So, the idea of working someplace different from where you live is one of those inventions of, in many cases, of the factory system. Obviously, shops had employees. The goal for most shop employees, though, was eventually to open your own shop, right? To reach your own level of mastery in your skill, and to either take over your master's business, maybe if the master didn't have a son, or your mistress's business if she didn't have someone to inherit, or to start your own eventually. With a growing population, that's entirely feasible. So, working, you lived where you worked, and in the case of women, even if they didn't have their own profession as middle class women, they were nearly always maintaining a side hustle that was part of household management. So most brewers in the Middle Ages were actually brewsters. They were women who were brewing the beer for the household, or the ale for the household, because beer is actually with the addition of hops. And then they just, as part of it, they made extra and they sold it. And that's actually where the first recorded, my earliest finding of a beer garden, in quotes, beer garden, so an ale garden, actually, is from a woman who actually set up she had a little garden, and she actually set up tables and sold ale in this little garden, and people would come. Instead of having a tavern, she had an outdoor ale garden. And I just thought that was so cool. He was in the 15th century or 14th century. How neat is that? Like, the idea, to actually be able to document, a point at least at which this was being done. And it was a woman, and it was her home business, so to say. But she made enough money from it that it was recorded in their expense accounts. Not expense accounts, sorry. That it was part of a will. It was in York. It was in York because it was one of the York wills. And so when she died, they did a probate inventory, which is an inventory of all the things that were in her possession upon her death, and that would, be counted for taxation and or for inheritance purposes, right? And they found she had a little garden. It was recorded that her house had a little garden, and that there were tables and serving implements for serving ale. And it was of a sufficient number that it was very clearly not just for home use. So even though it wasn't called, a beer garden, and it wasn't listed as anything like special business-wise, it seems that that's what she was doing. She was selling her homemade ale in her garden to patrons to make extra money for the household. Yeah, so I thought that was really interesting. Those are the kinds of fun details I like to find, because they give me a more full picture of what life was like in the past. And I don't know why I'm obsessed with how people lived in the past, and not just in Europe. I live in Korea. I love learning about how people lived in medieval Korea. Oh, speaking of which, all of you out there who are excited about historical Korean clothing, I reached out to Dr. Kim Min-ji, who is one of the editors of the Dress History of Korea. And she's put me on to, I reached out to her asking about resources and if she would come on my channel and do a live stream with me about medieval Korean clothing. And she has said yes to the live stream, but it will be in 2026. Her schedule's pretty booked, but I'm so honored that she would consent to come on my channel and let me interview her in a live stream. So if you're interested in historical Korean clothing and you'd like to actually talk to one of the world's experts, stay tuned. We'll be scheduling that and getting that up. It will be next year though, so you have plenty of time to plan to participate. Um, and she put me onto more resources that I hadn't, of which I was unaware for medieval Korean clothing. And she has agreed to answer any questions I have in advance of the live stream, because of course I'm interested in how things were hemmed, the kinds of seams that were used in medieval Korean clothing, what kind of edge finishes, decorative elements. I'm also interested in, any kind of sumptuary laws, right? These are things, resources that aren't really available to people who don't speak Korean at an academic level. And my Korean is like 4-year-old level, so academic she ain't. So I'm very excited and honored that she would consent to engage with me on this. And she seemed very excited to find a Westerner who was so interested in historic Korean clothes. And she said she'd never heard of Westerners recreating historical Korean clothes. And I'm thinking, lady, I've got a whole community of people who are interested in recreating historical Korean clothing. So, yeah. Yeah, Takeda, I'm so excited. I really am. Um, she seems so nice. I mean, I've watched her. She has several live streams on historical Korean clothing, on the Korea Society and the Society Koreana, and she always seems like really friendly and nice on those streams. But you never know until you engage with a person how they really are. And she, in this email, she just seems so friendly and so enthusiastic about my enthusiasm. And God knows I am super enthusiastic about historical Korean clothing. I really want to make a 16th century Joseon Queens ensemble. I just think it'll be so beautiful to have all of that fabric trailing elegantly on the ground. I love a good train. Those of you who know me know I love gowns with trains. The gown that goes over top of this one, all of them have trains. So yeah, um, very excited to learn these details because yeah, I mean, I'm tempted to just start making things, but I really would like to try to make them as close to the extant garments as possible. And so I need to know, are they running stitches in the seams? Is it back stitches? Is it, the running back stitch? How are the edges finished when there's linings? All these questions. And I can sort of see it in some of the pictures, but also it's kind of hard to tell sometimes what's conservation on extant medieval garments from any part of the world, not just Korea. Any extant garment, any medieval garment you see, you have to know if you care enough anyway to know, like I care, whether it's been conserved or not. And so which of those stitches you're seeing are conservation stitches and which are original to the garment. So I was so thrilled and I just haven't had time to get back to her. And every time I think about it, I'm someplace where I can't get back to her. Like now, tied up to my Fingerloop braiding, here present with all of you. Perfect example. But I wanted to get that out to you. And if you know anyone who's interested in historical Korean clothing, let them know that I've got some fun information coming out and that I'll be doing a live stream with at least one, if not more, experts in historical Korean clothing. I'm confident she's going to be able to put me in contact with others. And I'm really crossing my fingers that when I tell her I'm in Korea, she'll be able to put me in contact with some curators who'd be willing to actually take me behind the scenes and show me some of these historic garments. Maybe even let me touch some of them. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. Yes, that's the kind of geek I am. I don't know why. I've always wanted to touch the past, to experience the past in the most tangible way possible, but the beautiful parts of the past. I'm really not excited about mercury treatments for diseases. uh I'm not excited about phlebotomy. I'm not excited about anything about giving birth in the Middle Ages. But yeah, there's the beautiful aspect certainly interests me. Let me see. Have I seen the channel Townsend? I'm going to be honest. I don't have a lot of time to watch channels, but I think I have. I think I've heard of the channel Townsend. I feel like I've seen something on it. I bet 15th century. How dare I say 12th? It's fine, Amelia. No problem. My interest in living history actually started in the 12th century because I really love, especially the French garments in the 12th century. They're so elegant. What is commonly called the bliot. Yeah, it's just so beautiful. But I also love medieval dance. And what I found out, unfortunately, is we know nothing about dance before the 15th century in Europe. I mean, almost nothing. We have names of dances, we have some music, we have zero step descriptions and zero choreographies. So I basically switched to the 15th century, which is the earliest dance manuals we have. But it also worked out because there's a lot of the next period of interest to me was, especially the Burgundian court. It's elegantly attenuated hats and trailing gowns, and there's something spoke to me also about 15th century Italian fashions. And I've focused mostly thus far on the 1480s Florentine fashions, but I'm really wanting to get into some of the mid 15th century Northern Italian fashions because they have all those long trains that drag on the ground and big pendulant sleeves, some of which also drag on the ground. And I just love being a an elegantly floating boat of rich fabric, especially with some of these dances. Just they move so beautifully with all of that fabric around you. So I have that is on my list. I've had a couple of projects I would like to do, and unfortunately, to do it before I die, I think I'm going to have to use a sewing machine for the long seams because these gowns have hundreds of meters of long seams on the inside. Um, and there's literally not enough time in my life to make all of these garments by hand that I would like to make before I die of old age. So, but what I've been wanting to do is do a like outfit from every decade in 15th century or in 15th century Florence, for instance. And then I've wanted to do an ensemble from different places across, say, 1470 Europe. So you can then compare how fashions looked in different places in a particular decade in Europe. But I think to really have that kind of output, I'm going to have to use the machine for the hidden seams because those long seams take a long time to do well and securely. Even with a running stitch, a proper tight running stitch, it still takes a while. So, yeah, unfortunately, the content creation part of this job, the creating videos, takes a long time. One of those little 40-second shorts I pop out, like the actually edited ones, visuals and whatnot, each one of those takes at least half an hour, if not an hour, to script it and film it, gather the visuals, edit it together, right? That actually takes a lot of time. A 10-minute polished video or a 15-minute polished video, that's 50 to 100 hours of work probably. So the actual content creation side of this game takes a lot of time, a lot of my time actually, which is why these live streams are great because they don't take a lot of my time. I actually get to create the thing while chatting with you all rather than filming it and then going through the very laborious process of editing the thing and all of that. Yeah. Yeah, it would take a long, long time. Jupiter, not Mormon, still not Mormon. Do you actually know any Mormons? People say that a lot, and I think they don't actually have any Mormon friends. They have a very odd idea about how Mormons dress. Mormons usually dress in like business suits. Of course, I usually only see them out and about doing their ministry in the world. Like I run into Mormons here in Korea all the time. I mean, American Mormons on their evangelization missionary. That's what I'm looking for on their missionary trips. Mormons do not dress like this. You might be thinking of Amish, but Amish definitely do not dress like this. First off, colors are way too bright, way too much fabric, immodest neckline. There's all kinds of things very not Amish about what I'm wearing here right now. It is funny though. So many people say that Mormon, then Amish, then milkmaid. Lots of questions about if I churn butter. I do enjoy churning butter, actually. It's a very relaxing Zen-like process. If you've never churned butter, you're missing out on a wonderful, relaxing method of producing a very tasty thing. Get a butter churn, get some good cream from your local happy cow farmer, and go for it. It's not hard. The reason they used to send children to churning butter. Good way to keep them keep their energy in check also. That was not right. I might be able to salvage that. We'll see. Oh, Scotch eggs are so tasty. Ooh, I can make some Scotch eggs. Some ground. I could make lamb Scotch eggs. Oh, yummy. I've got some ground lamb in the freezer. Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. Thank you for that idea, whoever first suggested Scotch eggs. Great idea. Yeah, I mean, I will say that I have, because I travel the world, I've run into Mormon missionaries literally everywhere I've ever been. And they're always friendly and they're always polite and they're never pushy. All I have to do is tell them that I'm a hell-bound Catholic, and they're still polite. They just don't even bother trying. I did once break a Jehovah's Witness, though, and I don't mean physically. I was riding my bike. Actually, the night before going to, it was a nice summer evening, and I was just out riding my bike for a nice evening bike ride. And this kind of handsome looking young man approaches me and starts chatting me up. Turns out he's a freshly converted Jehovah's Witness and he's looking to convert someone else, I guess. Maybe he looked at me as a prospective bride if I would only convert to one of the weirdest cults of Christianity there is. And so we started chatting and I said, "Oh, I'm Catholic." And he got this horrified look on his face. "Oh my God, you're a pagan." I said, "Wait, what now?" Yeah, you're a polytheist." "Really? That is very interesting. Why on earth do you think I'm a polytheist?" "Well, you believe in the Trinity, don't you?" "Okay, what do you think the Trinity is there, buddy?" It's like, and I broke it down for him. I'm like, "Okay, do you believe," because I don't know enough about cult of Jehovah's Witness to know what he actually believed. But I said, "Do you believe in the God the Father?" He said, "Yes." "Do you believe in God the Son, Jesus Christ?" "Yes." "Do you believe in the Holy Spirit?" "Yes, I do." I said, "You believe in the Trinity, my friend." I mean, it's much more complicated than that, but that's all I needed to do to break his brain. And he got this confused and horrified look on his face. And that's when I said, "Well, have a nice evening. Bye." And pedaled off way too fast for him to keep up. And yes, I am absolutely aware that the concept of the Trinity is much more complicated than that. And throughout the history of Christianity has led to all manner of conflict and much debate about what the nature of the Trinity, et cetera, et cetera. But that was enough for that conversation. We're talking about Scotch eggs. Oh, yeah. I don't bread my Scotch eggs. I just wrap them in meat and fry them, and that's good enough. They're delicious. You don't need to muddle the flavors with breading. Blah. Why would you do that? Boil the egg, wrap it in a spiced ground meat mixture, and bake it or fry it in a pan. Oh, so good. Oh, so good. Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, I do know that the Jehovah's Witnesses believe that there's in predestination, right? So do the Calvinists, or so did the Calvinists. And I'm not certain if the Presbyterians still believe that stuff. Um, but the Calvinists that was one of their things, was, of course, predestination. There are only 244,000 spots in heaven or some nonsense like that. I was more referring to their liturgy and their catechism rather than, that weird predestination nonsense. And talk about a way to get out of actually acting like a good human being. Predestination. Pfft, what bullshit. Just like the prosperity gospel is bullshit. Unfortunately, I run into that in Korea amongst Korean Christians a lot, and it's very disappointing. People who are otherwise very nice people have this really false belief that if you're poor, it's because you deserve to be, and God is punishing you. And if you're good morally, then God will bless you. And all you have to do is be a good person, and God will bless you with wealth and good fortune. Therefore, if you don't have wealth and good fortune, it's because you've been a bad person. And what it does is it removes any impetus or onus to actually help poor people improve their lives at all. Very disappointing. I don't believe that. That is absolutely not something Catholics believe. They seem to forget Jesus's actual messages. But it wasn't even, this is just how it is in my family. We've always been a very do good things for your fellow man kind of family. I've been doing charity work, like literally going and bringing people in economically challenged circumstances, food and goods and Christmas presents since I was like 5. My grandmother would take me with her during her community outreach work. And I would be the one who would actually bring the items to these people living in these very, very challenging circumstances, especially compared to, the way I grew up. I grew up middle class. I didn't realize that meant I was in pretty damn good situation until I started, helping my grandmother in this way. And it made me realize just how lucky I really was. Anyway, ever since then, I've been working to try to bring that good fortune to other people. Last night there was this very elderly lady, Korean matron, very old, bent over permanently at the hips from calcium having been sucked out of her bones by childbearing, from having spent her life bent over cleaning or working in the fields. And she was going through the trash looking for cardboard or other things she could get money for from the recycling center. And that just shouldn't be in a country as wealthy as Korea, as wealthy as the US either. So I ran back upstairs, and I knew I had an unopened box of a really expensive medicinal tea. It's called Royal Palace tea, Sanghata, for those who know. And it's filled with really precious, expensive items to make an herbal, what we would call a tisane, an herbal tea. And I ran back down and I gave her the box. I didn't think she would, there's a certain pride also. So I didn't think she would probably want me to hand her an envelope of money, which I would have, honestly. But I did give her the box of tea. It shouldn't be. She shouldn't be. She's probably 80, 85, maybe even 90 years old. She was ancient. She shouldn't be having to go through the trash just to make a living at her age. Anyway, another aspect of medieval life I really like is that there were quite a few charitable institutions. And unlike the workhouses, they actually provided for people, for orphans, for adults. Hospitals were absolutely charitable institutions. Anyone could go to them and get treated and not have to pay. A lot of the horrors that we associate with, social horrors we associate with medieval life, are actually post-Reformation, in fact, and even post-industrialization. Cole, welcome to my community. Yeah, I do medieval living history, and sometimes I wander off on topics of social justice, but yeah. So I do medieval living history. I focus on the 15th century, and I'm wearing a 15th century Italian Florentine dress called a gamora, which I hand sewed in its entirety. Everything on my body is entirely hand sewn, which is why I'm having issues with myself going back to using machine for the long seams, but I'm really just going to have to, or I'm never going to get these projects that I want to get done. And I also do all sorts of medieval handcrafts. I do medieval cooking. I teach, research, reconstruct, and teach medieval and Renaissance dance. I read medieval philosophy, and am exploring medieval material culture and what daily life was like, and seeking to experience it firsthand rather than just by reading in a book. So the things I read, I try to put into practice when that does not involve toxic treatments like red and white lead and mercury. But there are medieval medicinal. That was another myth to bust that we will be busting at one of our future medieval myth busting episodes. was that medieval medicine was just pure quackery with no scientific basis, which is also not true. Medieval medicine was very scientific. It's just that the science was humoral science, which means it wasn't necessarily always accurate, but it was very scientific in the sense of there was a science to it, there was a system, very systematic underpinning to it, and it had been the same systematic underpinning since ancient times, right? Humoral theory. It's a theory that still underpins Eastern medicine, by the way. So, a lot of the treatments they had did in fact work, and they even understood why some of them worked. They understood how some of them worked. I was reading through my Plantagenet Age uh, book of chronicles from that era, and there's some excerpts on medieval health, and there's a recipe for anesthetics. So not full out anesthesia like we would understand it, but for like henbane, for instance, was used as anesthesia. And they actually also acknowledged that it could be possible to put someone into a coma and that they would die if you give them too much. So they actually say make a decoction of the henbane, and then while you're working on them, because they won't feel it, you have to occasionally smack their cheeks to quicken them so that they do not fall into too deep of a slumber and never awaken, is what the original source actually says. And that was really interesting to read because, everyone imagines that pre-modern surgery is just, people biting down on a wooden stick and tolerating it, but that's just not true. As long as you had the right herbs, there's lots of herbs out there that will either put you into a semi-coma, a full coma, or that are analgesic. They'll numb the surface, right? Clove oil was a known analgesic in the medieval period, and if you've ever chewed on a whole clove and felt your mouth go numb, you'll know whereof I speak. So it wasn't all brutish and horrible at all. In fact, yes, there were some pretty disgusting jobs and pretty unappealing treatments and compounds in the Middle Ages. But you know what? We've got some pretty disgusting jobs now. And we've got some pretty unappealing materials out there in the world that we use on a daily basis. We just haven't realized it yet, necessarily, just how bad some of these things are. Have you ever thought about what Drano is, by the way? Yeah. There's a reason you're not supposed to go into the bathroom for a good long time after you use that stuff. Let me see. Okay. It wasn't just, I apparently missed some stuff. Oh, good. Thank you for holding up the chat for me, Twitchy Witch. Appreciate you. Also, Kaylee, appreciate you. I mean, the thing is, I think a lot of modern people don't realize that most of the actives, the active compounds, the active ingredients in modern medicine were discovered in herbs, were isolated in nature from natural substances, and that they've just been synthesized for the most part now. But the actual compounds originally came from plants. And if you super concentrate something is when it starts reaching really super medicinal level. It's alkaloids, they're all naturally occurring. Heroin, or morphine, that's natural. That's an alkaloid that occurs quite naturally. In many cases, modern medicine has, the most latest in modern medicine has, of course, gone beyond that to complete engineering. But up until relatively recently, even a lot of the medicines that we've been prescribed were plant in their origins before we discovered which compounds they were exactly and figured out how to isolate them and concentrate them. But the point is that, medieval people also didn't want to feel pain during surgery, and they did go through surgery. Women had breast reductions, by the way, in the Middle Ages. So, because small breasts were the style, and apparently some women really wanted to have small breasts, and so we actually have records of breast reduction surgery, which in a pre-antibiotic era, that strikes me as foolhardy in the extreme. But on the other hand, I think volunteering for cosmetic surgery, if you don't need surgery, is dangerous even in the modern world, considering what modern anesthesia will do to your brain. 25% of patients who undergo anesthesia experience a cognitive decrease of some kind. It might not be obviously enough to make you notice immediately, but yeah. So medieval women, I guess, wanting to have perky apple-like breasts is no different than modern women wanting to have perky, bigger than apple-like breasts, and therefore volunteering for surgery. Yeah, it's breast reduction is definitely an interesting idea. If you ever look, it's interesting how aesthetics change, and the apple breast thing is very much a 15th century German craze. This just it's kind of two breasts just like poking somehow straight out, magically defying all gravity. That's a German thing in the 15th century. But yeah, apparently there were some women who were busty, and busty was not fashionable. It was considered, not not appealing, apparently. And so these women would actually volunteer for breast reduction surgery, which is not quite as bad as Federico da Montefeltro, who took a lance to the eye. He's a 15th century condottiero, the Duke of Urbino. He took a lance to the eye in a tournament, and they couldn't save the eye. So while they were doing the surgery to remove what was left of the eye, he actually told them, and you'll recognize his profile picture because from his forehead to his nose is a straight line, and then his nose comes out at this right angle from his forehead. That's because he told them to remove the bridge of his nose so that with his good eye, he could see to the other side. And apparently, according to the chroniclers who documented it, I've read the chroniclers, they say with such remarkable composure, he sat there and uttered not a single word while they did this. And just like they removed the bridge of his nose. Ouch. Ouch. But he survived the surgery. He did not develop sepsis, despite every real expectation that he should. And he healed and lived to be a relatively old man and very successful. And apparently, being able to see out the other side with his one eye must have been good for him, at least in the sense of he lived a pretty long time for a condottiero. Okay, so here we go. This is the so-called string. This is the lace bend. And yeah, as you can see, it's very forgiving. Because there were lots of places where I lost my concentration chatting, and but it just doesn't show. So that's fantastic. Great. Now this is something you actually need quite a bit of this to make one of these little guys. It looks little, it is little. And it doesn't look like it should really need a lot, but the snaking back and forth in all of those little chevrons takes up meters and meters of narrow-wear. So actually I'm probably going to need probably 10 meters of this. And I think I've got one here. So yeah. Onward with more of it. Okay, I guess if I look really closely, I can see where things were not quite right, but it still did something. It produced a braid-like thing, so that's okay. Okay, well, next one. Oh, goodness. Spool up our yarn. Okay, get our warping chairs, which is a me term, not a medieval term. It's not like a bundling bed or something like that. I'm confident that, medieval people did not exist alone. Like there's a reason hermits were considered really strange. So yeah. Let me find where I actually ended this off. Yeah, there's a reason that hermits were considered a special thing in medieval culture because it wasn't normal to be alone. Living alone, being alone was it's actually not normal in a pre-modern society, honestly. And it's probably why so many people are so depressed these days is because we spend so much time alone, right? And it's not good. We shouldn't be this alone. We shouldn't be this isolated from each other. So I'm wrapping this a way that is, no, I can wrap this way. So, you would have someone with you for this, actually. You would be able to, you would have them, I expect that you probably have two people holding their arms up separate from each other, however distance you want, and you would just wrap around their arms. Honestly, is I think probably how it actually went in the actual Middle Ages. We don't know because the manuals don't actually say how to set up your loops. They just assume you know how to do that. And that's pretty typical for a medieval manual on anything. They generally assume that you already know the basics because you're part of medieval society. And these manuals are not introducing a new innovative thing, not in the Middle Ages. They're introducing merely, or they're describing something that's been done for a long time. So they assume that you, of course, already know the basics. So why would you waste parchment, and um, precious scribal time on something where everyone already knows the basics? The same thing in the dance manuals in the 15th century. The printing press changes all that. It's the advent of the printing press is when we start getting like seriously detailed dance instructions. Then suddenly they realize that they can use paper and ink on those kinds of details that everyone assumes you already know. So point is the manual for fingerloop braiding, although it does provide very detailed instructions for the patterns, it assumes that you know the basics. So there's still some things that we've kind of had to reconstruct on our own or on the basis of later braiding manuals. Although I've never looked at the later braiding manuals. There are braiding manuals from the 17th century. I don't know if there are manuals beyond the 17th century, I'll be honest, because I don't really care. The Reformation, for me, things start getting really dark and depressing in Europe as of the Reformation. And after that, it doesn't really ever get better again for me. It's just a really sad time. People get more and more isolated. The gap between rich and poor just gets absolutely over the top. And then, of course, with the Industrial Revolution, we really set ourselves back socially in so many ways. Let's see, seven, 8. Check. Yes, great. Okay. Now, I will say my fingers have been a little tender, not the muscles, but the skin. But I expect that I'll redevelop some of the calluses that I have when I am in a fingerloop braiding craze. Just like any physical activity, if you stop doing something for a while, your calluses will go away. And then if you start it again, first you get some blisters, and then you develop new calluses. Great. So a knot here. And if you're setting up your own bows for finger loop braiding or lace making in the parlance of the 15th century, remember that you want to make sure any knots that you have to tie off ends are super secure, because there's a lot of force that is exerted upon these loops, and that therefore gets passed on to the loops, the bows, or the knots rather. And then if your knots are not secure, they will come undone. Ask me how I know. So you always, more knots is better. More is more in the case of knots when it comes to your finger loop braids. I think actually, how did I wasn't able to pull that off. New anchor. This yarn claimed to be pure cotton, but of course it actually has like nylon and rayon in it. And that's because apparently in Korea, pure cotton means that the cotton itself is pure, not that the yarn is made of pure cotton. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out how they can justify calling something pure cotton that's like 50% not cotton. But it's like somehow the quality of the cotton is higher. Like the cotton itself is not adulterated by cotton seeds or the branches from the cotton plant. I don't know. But yeah, so we bought these at the local market thinking they were cotton, but no one bothered to read the actual fiber content in the small print, which very clearly states and uh, rayon and nylon as two of the components. The reason I'm saying all this, I don't care about wasting this yarn on anchors, because I would never ever use synthetics in something that goes on my body unless I absolutely cannot avoid it. Okay, new loops for a second set of braids. Anchor weight. And how on earth? Ugh. Somehow my anchor ended up being very uneven. Thankfully, anchors are easy to pull out and readjust. I don't know how that happened. That's fascinating. Yeah. Anchors are very easy to pull straight out. And I can show you on the other one how to pull it out entirely. Because of course, when you go to use this, you don't want those anchor yarns hanging around. You want them gone. Well, they come right out, no problem. You don't have to worry about cutting anything. Do need to make certain, however, that the knot binding your loops is actually in the anchor and not off on its side, which just put itself on the side. Oh yes, thank you, Twitchy Witch. Let me get this bound up and then I will apply the bling as promised. Yes, indeed. I did promise that I would actually put on a little bit of decorative jewelry. And I do plan on doing that. Indeed, to adorn myself with fine wares by the goldsmiths known as Armor and Castings. Okay, let's try this. Third time's the charm. I don't know what's going on today. First, we had those big issues with the sound. Like, I have no idea why the sound was suddenly lagging so amazingly relative to my actual video feed. That's a new one. That was a new experience in live stream. That was exciting. Okay. Go ahead and tie this up. My anchors are actually even. The knot is on the proper side of the anchor. Yay. Great. Hello, Misa. Thank you for joining us. Okay. Good evening. Okay. Right. So here is the pendant I shall be putting on from Armor and Castings. And just look at the detail that they give it. They're a Ukrainian-based jeweler. They do have operations in the US, which is why they're able to still be producing. But their Ukrainian shop is also producing things for the war efforts. So, yeah, or at least they were. I'm not certain if they still are. Anyway, this is a replica of a nouch, as they're called in 15th century English, from Burgundy, actually. But we do know from accounts and death inventory, specifically Lorenzo de' Medici's probate inventory, his palazzo inventory when he died, that the Florentines were importing jewelry from Flanders and tapestries also. So we know that Lorenzo de' Medici had tapestries, maybe not this exact one because this one dates to like 1495, but similar to this because they were importing tapestries from Flanders into Florence. So the medieval world was extremely interconnected, and trade routes were very, very efficient at moving goods from point A to point B, even if point A is Cork, Ireland, and point B is Florence. And we know that trade route absolutely existed. So, okay. So here is the pendant. Looking lovely. Okay. Now, let us go ahead and get to the second braid. So this one is also going to be a lace bend round. And it will also be the cross pieces on the reta. So exact same procedure, which means I'm very adept at that braid now and should be able to hopefully pay better attention to the live chat. Okay. Yes, I look pretty good for 600 years old. Okay, so here we go. Setting up our brushing up on my knowledge for the medieval myth busting has, been really interesting, reminding me of things I used to know. And we'll know again because, you know, like I knew that most of the chastity belts, if not all of the chastity belts in museums, were 18th, 19th century hoaxes. But what I didn't know, apparently, and I haven't been able to chase this up further, but one source I read said that actually the reason chastity belts were invented became popular, gosh darn it, became popular in the 18th or the 19th century is because, I'm going to just drop the loop, is because women were working in factories in dangerous environments where they could be assaulted. And so apparently they started wearing these belts, not because of moral chastity, but as an assault protection method. And I wasn't able to follow that up to, that was an essay I was reading on the medieval chastity belt, so I wasn't able to follow up to see if that's actually true, but that would be very interesting and would make sense. Bonjour Zander, bienvenue. Thank you for joining us, France. Good God, it's so early in the morning there. Que bientôt. You're either awake very late or awake very early, I guess. Yeah, I'm just doing some 15th century lace making for my new reta, my Florentine decorative headpiece. And this is a lace bend of 8 bows, 1 worker. There is a lace bend of 16 bows for 2 workers. That makes, I assume, a much bigger one. And if my condottiero were here, we could demonstrate that for you. Now his back seems to be feeling much better, so that's good. Let's see, what else have I been reading about lately? Oh, I'm going to start, because The Witcher 4 is going to be coming out soon. I'm going to be looking at 15th century Polish clothing and comparing it to the clothing as depicted in The Witcher. I'm pretty certain I'm going to have a lot to say. Because I'm pretty certain that the clothing in The Witcher has nothing to do with the actual medieval Polish clothing, or 15th century specifically. Medieval, especially for women, they have this really fun, because it's getting cold, right? The 15th century is the little ice age. Things are getting cold all over Europe, and especially in the East, in places like Poland. And so women start wearing these amazing cloaks that go from the ground up to their noses. They have these high collars and then these standing collars, and they're like a column of fabric. I'm pretty certain they are not designed to billow out. They are not designed to be beautiful. They are designed to just basically swathe the lady to keep her warm. And I'm going to bet that there's no women in The Witcher wearing these cloaks like they should be. There's also an issue of, I think, probably something about modesty, although I'm going to have to read closer on that. I did find an essay on academia.edu, which is a really great website for academic essays on all sorts of historical topics, in case you weren't familiar with that site. I just discovered it last night. I was too tired to read it, but I think I might head out into the beautiful late spring day here in Daegu, South Korea, go down to the river and just sit and read it and be enjoying the lovely parks that they've created here in the city. And yes, I will go out dressed like this. I have no problem going out into Korea dressed in my medieval European clothes. And Koreans love it when I go out dressed like this. They absolutely adore it, especially the little girls. They just love seeing what they think is a princess, like they've seen in the Disney movies. Little Korean girls, they love it when I dress like this. Makes their day. Also, I really don't feel like changing again. I've already changed clothes twice today. Once into my workout clothes and then into this. I'm not up for a third costume change, as it were. Oh, by the way, if you like this kind of the bling you see in my videos, the reproduction medieval jewelry, that is all made by Armor and Castings, and I now have a discount code for you if you would like to go and purchase a piece of your own. They have super reasonable prices, guys, especially for their rings. And the code is Contessa 10. will get you an extra 10% off anything in their store. So if they're running a sale, you can take advantage of the sale price plus my discount code. So Contessa 10, you would like to bling up with these sort of beautiful pieces. They have belt fittings, they have clasps, closures for gowns, they have pendants like this. They've got so many different kinds of rings. They cover about 1,500 years of material jewelry history. And their items, I can really vouch for their items. Really quality workmanship. You can get them, they have gold plated options. They also have like solid silver options. So you can choose your level of pain, as it were. Yeah, so when the new Witcher series comes out, I'll definitely be doing a live stream with Philip from Irish Medieval History, and it's going to be a fashion historian reacts to the clothing from The Witcher. I'm going to try, I might actually do just a straight up reaction video so you can actually see my real reaction. I'll try to keep myself as unexposed as possible so that anything Philip shows me is just will be the genuine reaction. And I'll just try to have some imagery of real Polish medieval clothing from that era on hand to show you so you can see what it's supposed to be versus what it is. And then you'll also get to see what is probably a look of horror on my face, probably dismay, possibly derision, outright scorn in some cases, especially when it comes to objectifying women in non-medieval ways. Look, I'll be honest, I have no objection to sexually objectifying men or women. None. And I mean, it's humans. We're humans. It's part of our biological drive. What I object to in a historically based anything, game, movie, whatever, is when they objectify people in a modern way. That pisses me off. It really makes me angry if they objectify the women in a modern way, but are accurate actually with the men's clothing. That really gets my goat. So yeah, there are medieval ways to sexually objectify people. That was absolutely a practice in the Middle Ages, but it wasn't what we would do in the modern world. You know, evening gowns were not a medieval thing. Medieval people, so for example, for women to sexify themselves in the late 14th century, they would actually take foxtails, put them on a belt under their kirtles. So let's say this is a kirtle. It's the 15th century Italian version of a kirtle. So I would wear a belt under this. I would attach foxtails to that belt under this, and it would give me a rounder rump because round rumps were very fashionable and sexy in the 14th century. And if you look at the depiction of women in 14th century, especially later 14th century art, you will see that the silhouette is generally relatively curvy waist and a pretty ample bottom. And they achieved that with foxtails. And I don't know, maybe there was this horrible thought. I don't think there was. Maybe there was breast reduction surgery. Maybe no, I'm not even going to go there. Anyway, foxtails. So if you're going to sexually objectify your characters in your movie or your play or your game, then please do it in an authentic medieval manner. That's all I ask. And do it to members of all genders because, fair is fair. But, putting men in leather trousers because that's somehow sexy, whereas nice fitted pair of silk or wool hosen isn't, please. Please. I know which one I'd rather look at. So yeah, stay tuned for Fashion Historian Reacts to The Witcher. Are there any movies or videos you all have seen that just have such egregious historical misinterpretations? I just did a community post on Facebook. If you go to my posts, you can see I posted a painting that is pretty famous in medieval living history circles, especially fashion historian circles, because it supposedly depicts a white party that was hosted by Duke Philip the Good in the 15th century, in the 1430s. And I know a lot of people who've actually used it as the visual basis for their 15th century impression of clothing. Problem is, the original painting has been missing for centuries. And the painting that we have, there are two of them. One is a 16th century copy, one is a 17th century copy, and neither of them are accurate representations of actual 15th century fashion. They're accurate representations of what 17th century people thought their 200-year-old ancestors were wearing, but they're not accurate in any way. They're just inaccurate enough to be dangerous, because if you're a casual observer, you would think that's medieval. Except then you start looking at the hat. Wait, I've never seen an actual, say, patron or portrait in the 15th century with that kind of hat. Never seen a woman wearing that kind of hat. I've never seen those kinds of short sleeves on an overgown. You know, all sorts of details that are just a little off. And then, of course, the style of depiction is definitely not 15th century Flemish at all. So we're not the only ones who have, as a society or an era, that misrepresent clothing of the past. Apparently, we've been misrepresenting the clothing of the past since we started depicting the past in art. Oh, the live chat went away. Why did the live chat go away? I got seriously turned off fantasy because I got deeply frustrated with the modern take on medieval clothing, and it just robs me of any enjoyment. Twitchy, I'm right there with you. You know how often people say to me, have you seen such and have you seen the King? Have you seen the Tudors? Have you seen the Borgia? Either any of the versions of the Borgia. Have you seen the Medici? And I said, look, I saw stills of the clothing and it so disillusioned me that I just don't want to watch. I will just spend the whole time saying to myself, that's not how people dressed. That's not how people did their hair. I mean, all of they made some, I don't know, were they mini series? I think they were mini series, right? Of the Philippa Langley books. And talk about complete and utter tripe and fantasy. It was horrible, the clothing in which they were putting those ladies. Just horrible. So yeah, I generally don't watch historical period pieces that predate that are set in the Middle Ages. And it also seems like medieval fashion especially gets that kind of shoddy treatment, right? If it's set in the 18th century, they're way more accurate. If it's, set in the 19th century, way more accurate. Now that's getting less so these days. God knows some of the more recent Jane Austen interpretations have just been off the charts bad. I mean, wow. The hair, the makeup. Oh, don't even get me started on Bridgerton, Jesus. Like, I would be fine if it's just pure fantasy, right? Like, pure fantasy, then it can be whatever you want. That's your made up world. But if you're going to depict a historical world where the way people looked was a key aspect of society, then and a key aspect of history and why people behaved the way they did and how people behaved, then you need to represent the clothing and the hair, etc., correctly. Otherwise, just do a fantasy thing. Like Game of Thrones, which was actually better at capturing an authentic medieval silhouette and medieval color schemes than most medieval movies or TV shows have recently. Ashwarya, thank you for joining me. I'm doing what is called modernly fingerloop braiding. This is a medieval technique from the 15th century, and it's a kind of way of weaving pretty decorative braids and laces and trims without needing much in the way of equipment. I don't need anything. I could use my toe, scissors and yarn, and you're good to go. So it's also one of the things I like about this versus regular weaving versus tablet weaving or loom weaving of any kind is that I can actually stand up and do it, not sitting for hours on end, which pleases me greatly. I'm an active person. So yeah, this will be the thing, the laces that I make with this in the old sense of laces, not the modern sense of laces, I will then transform into a decorative headpiece from late 15th century Florence. So that is what I'm doing. I actually have a tutorial on this on my channel, like 18 minutes long, so it's not long. I'm making a pretty and simple version of this, so perfect for beginners. If you look up fingerloop braiding, just fingerloop probably on my channel, you should find it. under the long format content, so the regular video content. Do I know Manipur? I do not. What is Manipur? Could you tell me about that? That would be, I'm always looking to learn fun new things. So yeah, you've piqued my interest, shall we say. It's funny, maybe there are, the earliest book I can think of that talks about exercises for women in specific terms is Il Cortigiano, the courtier by Castiglioni. But it could be that even amongst noble women, they didn't think they needed specific exercises until then, because even crafty activities like this could be a little bit of a workout. Not that I have any evidence that a 15th century noblewoman would actually do this deal with her foot. This is all me. No evidence of this particular tightening technique whatsoever. If I'd attached it to my toe, I could sit down and do it in a more demure way, but that seems like sitting for no reason. Let me see. Hold on, I need to catch up. Do I know India? I do know India a little bit, Ashwarya. I do indeed. I have been to India. I've only been to the southern part. I've only been to Kochi. I do desperately want to get back and explore some of the more remote, definitely untouristed parts of India. I want to get out into the countryside, see how people live. I'd love to do a cooking tour of India, actually, where I learn to make various kinds of Indian curries and other dishes in the very local regions with, cooks who are cooking in the traditional manner. That's definitely on my list of things to do. Oh, Manipur. Okay, sorry. I thought you were talking about a technique. Aha. I thought you were talking about a braiding technique. Apologies. Yes, I know that Manipur is a state in India. I was thinking some kind of weaving or a craft named that. Yeah. Do you live in Manipur now? Is that where you're watching this from? Hello, Leanne. I am doing something that is modernly called fingerloop braiding. In the 15th century, they referred to this as lace making. And this is an authentic 15th century craft technique for making decorative braids and trims, what were called laces back then. And it is reconstructed from an actual manuscript from the 15th century, two manuscripts actually. This one is called a lace bend. And it basically kind of makes what looks like twisted braid, like the twisted braid you would have on an epaulet, like on a military uniform sort of thing. And I'm using silk, so it makes a really shiny thing. And then I'm going to take these laces that I'm making and I'm going to turn it into a decorative net-like headpiece called a reta in 15th century Italian. It's a Florentine style of headpiece that, as far as we can tell, was in fashion in this particular kind in the 1480s specifically, maybe the 1470s also. So I do medieval living history. My whole thing is experiencing how people lived, the aspects of daily life, their handcrafts, their social interactions, dance, food, by actually recreating it myself and getting a visceral idea of how things were. How long does it take? 15 years? No. I would say this braid for a meter, it probably takes about an hour to make, I think. Oh, thank you. I look like a Disney princess. Oh, that's a real compliment. I'll take it. When I go out dressed like this here in Daegu, South Korea, where I currently am, or gosh, if I'm up in Seoul, for instance, yeah, a lot of the little girls think I'm a Disney princess. I can hear them saying it as they walk by and gasp and giggle happily. Nearly always, they want to have their picture taken with me, and of course, I say yes. How could I not bring happiness to a young lady in that manner? Where am I from? That is an interesting question. I'm currently in South Korea. I was born and raised in the eastern United States in a small state called Delaware. No one knows Delaware, but I immigrated to Germany as a student at the University of Heidelberg, lived and worked in Germany for a whole lot of years, and then ended up moving to Korea, back and forth to Korea a couple of times, and here I am again. So where I'm from is a tricky question. I've lived all over the world. I've lived in Spain, I've lived in France, I've I've traveled a lot. I love experiencing other people's culture and history and cuisine firsthand. I love meeting people from other places. I like seeing what life is like in throughout the world. A very curious person in general, I guess. Twitchy, thank you for that lovely compliment. Yeah, I've thought also about doing one of the projects being where I actually really make. I know some other creators have done this, but maybe not as well as I would in terms of authenticity, where I actually make the authentic version of each of the queens or princesses, right? But the one specifically for medieval or Renaissance. Obviously, if it's set in the 18th century, and I could do that too, I guess, or 19th century, I guess I could do that too. My prom gown was a bustle gown, 1880s bustle gown, so that I made myself. Back then, there were no good supplies for those kinds of things, so I actually got metal rulers. And the internet was a wasteland of chat and porn. So I got metal rulers and I used metal shears to cut them into long strips because I had no idea what else to use to make a corset, like with actual strength. Yeah, that was quite a construction project, sartorially speaking. And I, drafted the pattern based on a theatrical costume book, which had pretty accurate Victorian patterns. Actually, it was not modern. They were not modern scenes at all. Medieval stuff was less accurate. Um, Ashwarya, I would love to come to Manipur, honestly. And the way, so the best way I think to travel around a country like India is honestly to have a friend, a local friend or an Indian friend who can actually speak. Because, of course, a lot of people don't speak English in India. English is the local languages can vary a lot. So I thought it would be better to travel with a friend who knew the area and spoke the language. Because I don't want to stay in a 5-star hotel. Like, I want to actually stay with families, and I want to, experience their lives, even for just a moment. Don't get me wrong, I do enjoy staying in 5-star hotels. It's I'm not going to pretend I don't, but I also enjoy the other end of that spectrum, which is, experiencing life in another place as the people of that place experience it. Yeah, that's okay. I'd love to collaborate with that. The Sleeping Beauty is my favorite. You know what? Twitchy Witch, you and I are so similar. Sleeping Beauty was one of my favorites growing up too, specifically because of all the dressmaking stuff that happens. I love that whole section about the dressmaking. I loved the Cinderella movie too because of the dressmaking, right? But yeah, Sleeping Beauty, I loved that whole scene and the cake making too, like where they're making the cakes. That movie just appealed to so many of my chosen passions, you know what I mean? Gilmore Girl Lover, thank you for joining us. Gina Mercury, welcome. How are you? Let me see, no, oh, that's a tricky word to say. No, 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 Nungiribo. I'm going to completely butcher that because of course I don't know where the rhythm in that phrase is. I just watched a guy go into Sari silk material shop here on YouTube. Yeah, I have been in a Sari shop in Kochi, but it was owned by pair of Muslim brothers, and it was right before the call to prayer, so we didn't really get to enjoy the experience. We were pretty much hurried through. I do love silk saris, though. Madeline, welcome. Maddox, thank you for joining us today. It could be the dressmaking scenes. Yeah, 100%. I'm pretty certain that's one of the things, one of two seminal moments that set me on my dressmaking path was watching those scenes in Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty. But also, I come from a very crafty family. Like my aunt was making her own dresses back in the 70s, and my grandmothers, plural, did, of course. So I'm pretty certain it's in my DNA in any case. Now, granted, my maternal grandmother was not doing it because she liked it. She was doing it because she was abandoned by her asshole husband and was raising two girls as a single mother in the 50s and 60s. So she had to for them to be able to have clothes, but still. Yeah, I've got some feelings about my grandfather and his failure as a father in an era when his main job was to support the family. But anyway, back to medieval life. Manipuri language, are you sleeping, means in tum labro. I'm probably saying that really badly too. I apologize, Ashwarya. Problem with written language is that without accent marks, it's hard to know where the rhythm of the language is. I think that's where I was. Oh well, I got talking and hopefully my fingers just automatically did the right thing. I'm hoping that at this point I'm just mostly an automated machine, you know. We'll see. This is this exercise. This is actually a medieval handcraft called Fingerloop braiding. Modernly, in the era, it was called lace making. It does turn into physical exercise, though, when you're doing really long loops. So it isn't technically, it's like crafting with Pilates, I guess. So you probably can't tell that because it's probably too fine to see. I've got silk loops on my fingers. They're anchored into this chair here. And I'm making a decorative braid, basically. Everyone take a drink. She lost her place in the pattern. That would be a dangerous. Am I supposed to actually tell you that every time I do it? Because I haven't always been admitting it. If that's going to be in the new drinking game, then I have to be honest about it. It means I also have to realize when I've done it. Yeah. Oh, I should probably switch legs. I can feel that quadricep cramping. Oh, goodness. So let's see. I have some really beautiful green wool sitting over there on my Joseon era writing desk, and I would like to turn it. I'm trying to decide whether to turn it into a new kirtle, Franco-Burgundian style kirtle, or to turn it into a more casual mid-level gown. That would be the thing that goes over top of the kirtle. So I'm still debating that. I don't have much of it. So if I turn it into a gown, it's certainly not going to have a train, which is okay. Not every gown I own has to have a train. You know, I really like trains. I like conspicuous consumption in fabric. But yeah, so it would actually require also probably more clever piecing together to get maximum out of the skirts. I do need some more kirtles. I also need some more gowns because the two gowns that I have that are operational right now are starting to get a little worn. One of them is starting to get a little worn anyway. I do have the dragon dress. Some of you may remember the dragon Burgundian gown where I need to rework the sleeve caps. If you want to see the details on that, you can check out my medieval sewing mistakes videos where I talk about that poor dress, which was my coronation gown for those of you in the SCA, and why I haven't worn it since then. I have to completely rework the sleeves and the sleeve cap or the arm's eye. And that's actually going to be trickier than it would be on a regular dress because of the turn back collar. But I was thinking this morning that the I might actually take the collar as it is, cut it off, and put on a detached collar instead of a turn back collar, which would make that process all just so much easier. Once I no longer have the extreme tailoring engineering of a turn back collar to worry about, if it's just a separately attached collar, then everything gets easier. So probably that's what's going to end up happening with the dragon dress. Unfortunately, I don't have an assistant here to go and fetch the dragon dress, and I am bound up in my loops. I didn't know I'd be talking about the dragon dress. See, Condottiero, you are needed. The cats, once again, have failed to be useful. For those of you who are interested in travel, I have a travel channel, Travels with the Creative Contessa. If you're interested in seeing my adventures in and around the world, flight reviews, flight blogs, hotel reviews, that kind of thing, cruising blogs. I do a lot of cruising. Well, I don't do a lot. I cruise about once a year in vintage style cruise ship where we can do dress up every night and go ballroom dancing. So if that sort of thing interests you, check that out. Otherwise, you can stay right here on my Medieval Living History channel, where I'm always doing something crazy and always sharing my discoveries. And if you'd like to support my work more directly and benefit from a whole host of perks like extra full hour tutorials and extra video that's only shared with my patrons and channel members, you could consider becoming a patron or a YouTube channel member. The Creative Contessa on Patreon. I've got advanced finger loop braiding, advanced embroidery classes, dance classes, extra uncut footage. You can see all the bloopers of me saying bad words in the middle of filming things and laughing about it, not angrily. I always laugh at myself. Life is too short to take oneself too seriously. Yeah, sorry, I'm not going to share my phone number in a public forum like this. It's just that's absolutely not a safe thing to do in this era of data stealing. Sorry. I'm happy to engage with you and talk about pretty much anything, but I will not give away private information like that. Sorry. I do have a website, thecreativecontessa.com. If you want to check out, I offer workshops and I have past classes if you want to look into purchasing access to any of those. I can also be hired to bring the medieval magic to your event, teach handcrafts, lead dancing. I'm an expert at leading magical, historical, and fantasy balls. I'm an excellent dance teacher. And I can just generally bring my Contessa energy and enliven your function. I have lots of experience emceeing. I'm a professional MC also. Lots of things. In my past life, I was a professional translator, but the machine translation apps have basically killed my career. And companies no longer want to pay, actually, for translators in European languages. They're perfectly happy to let the Google Translate do most of the work. And, they'll pay a translator a pittance to clean it up, maybe. But for the most part, it's a dead career field. I had companies wanting to pay me the same as I was earning in 2005 as a brand new baby translator versus one with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of hours of experience and training. So I had to find something else to do, moved to the harder to replicate field of medieval living history and sharing medieval living history with other people. So that's why I'm doing this now. Welcome back, Cole. What's my favorite craft? Oh, so I guess it depends on how you define a craft. Um, I really love embroidery. I don't know if that counts. That is a craft. I love embroidery. Um, and I really do love finger loop braiding because it's so physically active, right? It is really one of the things I love to do because I don't have to sit to do it. And the results are pretty immediate. It goes pretty quickly. Embroidery take forever to finish a piece, depending on the complexity and the stitches you're using. Finger loop braiding moves real fast. This might be my favorite craft. I really enjoy hand sewing in general. It's very relaxing. I enjoy tailoring. I enjoy the challenge of figuring out how to take two-dimensional shapes and turn them into a three-dimensional object like clothing. And it really challenges the sort of geometric part of my brain, or geometrically inclined part of my brain. Oh my God. And so Old English is, I do not do Old English. Old English is Beowulf, right? Old English is basically a completely different language and has more akin with German than with modern English. Middle English, I couldn't teach a class in it. I can pronounce Middle English. Yeah, I can get by in Middle English. I certainly can't, Middle English is Chaucer, right? And that is also a different language, basically. I can read it, I can pronounce it, but it's not in my active vocabulary. Early modern English is pretty okay. I'm decent at early modern English, but Middle English, that's Chaucer. That's a challenge because there's still a lot of the heavy Germanic stuff in Middle English. They're still pronouncing in Chaucer's English, they're still pronouncing the GHs. So it's not bought, but it's bocht, tocht, tocht, right? That's how those words would be pronounced. So yeah, it's definitely more of a leap from modern English to Middle English than most people think. Shakespeare is modern English. A lot of people don't realize Shakespeare is modern. Yes, he has a very poetic bend to him, and a lot of the vocabulary is obsolete or has a different meaning now. But in terms of orthography and pronunciation, Shakespeare is modern English. It's funny because so many people think, and I'm not saying you think this, Twitchy, mind you. Many people, your average casual English speaker assumes that Shakespeare is Old English. It's modern English, guys. Slightly early modern, but really not even what's officially early modern. It's just modern English. So now, granted, the pronunciation is different versus especially American pronunciation rules, but that's, English in the 16th century was much more dialectical than it is now. Although, being said, when I was still doing translation work, one of my jobs was actually transcription work. And it was a BASF had done, German company, BASF had done a panel, an advertising panel in Yorkshire for their fertilizers. And they had just set the crappiest quality microphone you can possibly imagine. I think this was probably 2006. The crappiest quality microphone you could possibly imagine, 2008 maybe, in the room, in an echoey room, and asked these farmers questions they showed them posters, advertising posters that they'd come up with. And they asked them questions, how did this make them feel? Did this make them want to purchase the fertilizer? And their accents were so thick. And the sound quality was so bad anyway that we weren't even getting every word. But they wanted a full transcription, and then they wanted that translated into German. And I'm just like, guys, if you want a good transcription, you need good quality sound quality. You need good sound equipment. It was so hard to understand these farmers. Oh my gosh. But I mean, that was in part because the microphone was not an omnidirectional microphone, and it was just randomly in this echoey room. Yeah, pretty bad. Yeah, Eshwariya is the language spoken in Manipur. How closely related is that to Hindi? Is it related to Hindi, or is it completely different? Is it mutually intelligible? There it is. Am I Amish? Take a shot, everyone. No, I'm not Amish. No Amish woman dresses in colors so bright, nor with so much fabric, nor with such a low neckline. I am a 15th century Florentine lady at home engaging in a lovely craft in her. So I've invited you to come and join me for my little sewing party, my little crafting party. Not Amish. This kerchief on my head, what many people call a coif, um, only vaguely looks like modern Amish ones if you were actually to really do a side by side comparison. But I grew up in Amish country, so no, not Amish. Italian. Yes. The nice thing about finger loop braiding is it's really easy to fall into this zen-like state. Just really relax. Your mind can just wander freely. Some of my best ideas I have while finger loop braiding, honestly. And when finger loop braiding is depicted in medieval imagery, I told you about the baby Jesus and his mother finger loop braiding together. It's great to be the son of God and be born with all the knowledge of the world, I guess, and especially great for Mary, who has an instant crafting partner. Um, but there's also often there's a really great retablo, altarpiece from Spain that shows a bunch of female saints engaged in different handcrafts, and so you can actually see these 15th century handcrafts being depicted side by side. One of which is finger loop braiding, and so the implication being that it was perhaps a common practice for ladies to get together and just engage in a variety of different crafts. Not that everyone had to be doing the same thing at all. So I'm hoping that's kind of the format we're following today. What is everyone working on today? Is anyone out there engaged in some kind of crafty thing, sewing? I forgot to bring tea. No wonder I'm getting thirsty. Yeah, exactly. Okami girl. Yeah, no, absolutely. No, certainly no jewelry, no, and adornment of any kind, really. Yep. No, you're absolutely right. It's just the Amish are all about modesty, avoiding the vices of the modern world, right? It's all about simplicity. In fact, I was just in Chicago recently. I took the train from St. Louis to Chicago. So I was at Chicago Union Station, another one of those grand, glorious train stations, by the way, like they don't build anymore. And there were 200 Amish people who were taking the train. I grew up in Amish country, and I've never seen so many Amish people in one place. But it was really funny. They had phones, they had cell phones. Like that's somehow, oh no, that doesn't feel like it's in line with the tenets of Amish life. But maybe that's the modern Amish. I know many Amish people who have solar cells and use propane lamps and whatnot. So, you know, I guess maybe as the world continues to advance past 19th century technology, well beyond 19th century technology, increasingly Amish communities are realizing that maybe they don't have to completely eschew modern technology in order to live a modest life. But that was just, I've never seen Amish people with smartphones before, but I did at Union Station. Let me see. Does Minecraft count? I mean, sure. It's crafting of a sort, Nevis, I guess. Imran, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Rice packets, the kind you get. Oh, nice. Oh, you're making embroidered ones? Oh, God, that's such a brilliant idea. Why should a rice packet have to be boring and plain, right? If you're going to put it on your body or have it in your space, it might as well be decorative. That's fantastic. Brilliant. About to start attaching lacing rings. If you have questions, sci-fi cheer girl, let me know. Uh, you've got the question. Thank you, handsome. Oh, yeah. Hey, if you guys are enjoying this, please subscribe. And of course, don't forget to hit that like button. Although if you're making comments, you kind of had to subscribe. But yeah, if you're watching and you haven't yet, please go ahead and subscribe and do double tap that screen if you're on a mobile device or hit the like button. Also, if you're feeling so inclined, if you're really enjoying the comment, there is the super chat option. If you'd like to reward me for my efforts today. And if you don't, that's fine too. I just appreciate you all being here with me. But some people don't know what that super chat button is for. YouTube is terrible about explaining this stuff sometimes. But if you become a channel member or a Patreon member, it's even better because then you get access to all sorts of bonus content. Members only videos, tutorials, entire classes, uncut footage. I share a lot of things, primary resources. A lot of my research and the resources I find, I share with my patrons and my channel members at every opportunity. So there's a lot of extra things there for people who really want to get into the nitty-gritty of medieval living history. Let me see. um, let me see. How do you spend a lot of the time in the freezer lifting boxes? And I use them to keep warm. Oh, that's a good idea, right? It's a brilliant idea. Initials for your coworkers? Yeah, to actually identify them. I'm not dressed like a pilgrim. I'm dressed like a 1480s Florentine lady of upper class standards, and I do medieval living history. So I explore medieval material culture by recreating it and experiencing it firsthand, but only the positive stuff, none of the negative stuff like dying in childbed from childbed fever or mercury treatments or lack of dying of a paper cut because of no antibiotics. Only the good, only the fun stuff: food, games, clothing, dancing, courtly life, deeds of arms, knightly combat, that kind of thing. Medieval glamping. I love medieval glamping, and I will be doing 15th century glamping here at the end of July, last week of July, first week in August. I will be live streaming my 15th century glamping experience for you all at Penzic. I will be teaching lots of 15th century dance classes and live streaming them, so you can see what that looks like. I'll live stream setting up my camp. You can watch me setting up a rope bed, stuffing the mattress ticking, setting up a 15th century pavilion all by myself, probably. All those sorts of details, I will live stream that. So if you're interested, definitely make sure you hit that notifications button and hit all of, make sure that it notifies you of everything. Because if you don't, it will only notify you of what it thinks you want to watch, which is maybe not the same as what you want to watch. Yeah, that's coming up, and I'm actually preparing for that. I've also actually had a request to teach a workshop. So this thing that I'm making right now, or the reason that I'm doing this lace making, this finger loop braiding, I'm going to be making a decorative 15th century coif called a reta out of that. I'm going to be offering a workshop on that, so stay tuned for that. And I am offering a workshop on making the kerchief that's currently on my head, what many of you call the milkmaid coif. That is actually tomorrow. If you go check out my website, thecreativecontessa.com, you can sign up for the class there. It's pay what you will. So if you can afford to pay something, then feel free to pay something. If your financial circumstances prevent you from actually paying anything, and that's fine too. Just enter the amount that you can in the tip box and you'll get registered and be sent the Zoom login information for the workshop. I will be teaching all of the basic steps, hand sewing, laying out the pattern for it, assembling it. We'll talk about the history of the headpiece. We'll go through some of the imagery. It's a full experience. 3 sessions, 2 hours each over the next 3 weekends, and all sessions will be recorded. It will be live via Zoom, so I'll be able to see you. You can show me what you're doing and I can give you feedback. And the sessions will be recorded so that if you miss anything, you can catch up on your own, or you can rewatch the workshops if there's something you need to refresh on. So thecreativecontessa.com, make your own milkmaid coif. Some people know me as the Contessa. In the Society for Creative Anachronism, I am known as Judith Northumbria, where I'm a countess and a master of the Order of the Laurel. So I guess some people, actually, my princess name is probably therefore Judith. But many people call me the Contessa, Madonna Contessa, or Madame la Comtesse. Oh, Okami, thank you. That's super generous of you. I really appreciate that. You're amazing. And of course, I do appreciate all of you out there who are members and patrons. Really, you guys have just been so wonderful to me. Twitchy, you're one of my your channel members. I really appreciate you. Oh, no. There we go. Let's see. So does anyone have any big project plans? You know, I always have a lot of things I'd like to do. I'm actually in the middle of reworking my Not a Hennin pattern. That is that tall, steeple-shaped hat that many people associate with the medieval princess, the quintessential medieval princess look. Mine was very old and got crushed by the baggage gorillas who were handling my luggage on my last medieval living history tour, world tour. So I needed to remake it. And so I'm reconsidering the shape of the cone, the angle of the cone, how it's going to actually stay on my head. And I think I'm going to do just a basic one to get done in time for Pennsic, this big event I was talking about at the end of July. So by basic, I mean, I think I'm going to cover it in just a nice silk damask. But I would like to make one that's pretty elaborate with gold and pearl work on it. But I've got to be realistic. I'm not going to have time to do that by Pennsic. And I do need a new one by Pennsic. But you can also check out the short that I did on the big reveal on my new, very sexy frontletted veil over what is called modernly a flower pot or truncated hennin, but in the Middle Ages was probably in English just called a bonnet. It was called un atour in French, and it was called a berreta. There's a word for it, but kind of pointed hat in the French style, because apparently in the mid 15th century in Florence, the tall French style headdresses became very fashionable, the escoffion style ones. And so they were referred to in the sources, in 15th century Italian sources, openly as being French style. So, you know, this kind of shows that there was absolutely an awareness of regional variations in clothing, and that certain items of clothing were very much associated with a very specific part of Europe, and that people actually generally had an idea of what that was. So it's reading chronic. There's to understand medieval clothing, you can't just look at art. You have to read primaries. You have to read chronicles. It's a very multidisciplinary field. You have to read inventories. You have to read laws. Legal cases even will often offer an insight into historical fashion. Archaeology, it's nice when we have it, but there isn't much in the way of surviving medieval clothing, unfortunately, because of the circular economy of the medieval world, meaning that people would, reuse everything until it was falling apart, and then it got put in the walls as insulation, generally, which if we have, most of the textile finds we have from the Middle Ages by number, not necessarily by volume, by number is because they were put into walls or floors to use as insulation past the point where they could really be used for anything else. So we don't have whole garments in that case. We have like the upper left quadrant of a bodice of a gown, or we have a sleeve, the lower cuff sleeve remnant, or you have the foot of a pair of hosen. But that's better than nothing, because those pieces can be very informative. Other remnants we have that are better, usually slightly more intact condition, are the instances where people are interred in their clothing, which started happening increasingly as the Middle Ages wear on, because the practice used to be that people would be wrapped up in a shroud, naked, like not wearing any clothes at all. And then if you were wealthy, like a king, you would then be wrapped in wax linen wraps like a mummy, but most people didn't get that treatment. But for some reason, and I haven't actually read up onto the reasons why this change might have happened, they start interring people in clothing instead, in addition to a shroud. Like they're in the clothes and then they're shrouded, instead of naked and then shrouded. So thankfully, when they open those tombs, we often find pretty intact clothing. Because in Italy, where we're starting to increasingly find medieval clothing, late medieval, 14th, 15th century, as they're renovating crypts because, damage from earthquakes to churches or water damage, and then they have to renovate the floor of the church, and that's usually where people are interred. So then they find clothes, and then they call in the archaeologists, and then the archaeologists do an intensive study and restoration, and then we learn a lot. That's how we have the clothing of a very puissant knight, and the Count of Cavagnalia, or shit, he was not, well, Diego di Cavagnalia, but he was the Count of something else. I forget. It starts with an M. Anyway, he died in one of the last crusades to be called, actually. And he was interred in clothing he definitely wore in life because it has signs of wear, and probably clothing that he wore under his armor because there's so many different holes poked into the skirting of his farsetto and his doublet. And some of them have had a lot of pressure put on, which I theorize is the weight of his leg harness. And because his garments are in such good shape, it's like the only only one of two ever extant 15th century doublets we've ever found in all of Europe, as far as I know. And the only one that's late 15th century, 1481 is when he died, trying to defend Oltrarno from the Turks. And it's in very good condition, considering that, he sort of decomposed in it. Fabric, and you're going to be shocked to hear this, fabric doesn't like the results of decomposition very much. So, the backs of these garments usually don't do terribly well. When they do, we're pleasantly surprised. But once they restored it, this manky looking bundle of cloth that they pulled out of this crypt, once they gently washed it by hand, of course, soaking it and getting it to relax back out and rehumidify, what they found was very intact garments, his farsetto and his giornea. Unfortunately, hosen didn't survive. It could be that he wasn't actually interred in hosen at all. And the any linen undergarments, they definitely didn't survive. But plant fibers don't generally survive well in the archaeological record, which gives us a very skewed view about the materials out of which medieval clothing was made. Because if you go based on what survives in the archaeological record, then hell, the only thing anyone ever wore was mostly wool with occasional silk. But we know that's not true. Thankfully, the second prong of exploring historical fashion is documentary evidence, like inventories and wills and expense accounts and ricordanze in the case of Florence. Even records from the weaving shops that talk about their output. Customs records also give us a lot of really good information about items that are being traded between places. So, the study of historic fashion is absolutely multidisciplinary if you're looking to really understand everything. You just want to make a costume, that's a different thing. But I'm a amateur fashion historian, not just a costumer. I do enjoy just making pretty costumes, though, so don't get me wrong. Darn, the big window has gone blank. So I'm assuming I missed a whole bunch of comments. If you asked a question of me and you really want me to answer it, pop it back in the live chat. Sorry, I fell into one of my mini lectures. And that meant I completely missed the entire chat. And now it's all gone because that's how it works on the big screen. It vanishes very quickly. I don't know why. Makes no sense, but there it is. I guess you can kind of see the thing I'm weaving there, can't you? I know it looks just like a string. So yeah, I can see why anyone would look and say, why are you putting all that effort into making a string? But once it's finished and I show it to you up close, I think you'll agree it's Well, you may agree it's not just a string. It's actually a very lovely, shiny silk braid, basically, silk twist. Anyway, a tip if you're standing to do any kind of work, standing still, especially like I now am, you should actually put your feet in third position. It's third position in ballet, meaning that your heels should be together and your toes should be pointed out at a 45-degree angle from each other so that you actually engage the muscles along the backs of your legs and your buttocks. And that takes the strain off of your skeleton and actually makes your muscles do the work. So you actually will develop a nicer musculature along your legs while also reducing the stress on your skeleton, your bones and joints, thereby also increasing the longevity of your bones and joints. This applies too if you're working in the kitchen, for instance. You know, the reason that standing still can actually leave us so much more exhausting than walking some places because most people don't stand still properly. They let their skeleton take all of the damage basically instead of actually using your muscles to hold you up. Okay, almost at the point where I can no longer get my fingers through the loops. So I'm almost at the point of just breaking it down into 3 groupings of strands and finishing up with the 3-strand braid the way I do when I end my finger braiding. Not everyone does that. I do it because I'm nearly always going to use it for something else later, and I just want it to stay as preserved as possible rather than maybe start coming undone. So any of you finger loop braiders out there, do you have a favorite braid? I have to say, well, loops came off my fingers. I'm going to call that good. I'm going to say probably my favorite braid is, in terms of the beauty it produces, is I'm really liking the lace masquelle because it's so delicate. The lace indentured is really pretty too. Yeah. The green dorge, of course, is simple but decorative. Okay, so once I get this done, I think we are at the, oh yeah, we're at the corner part of the episode. It's been 3 hours. Wow. It's amazing how quickly time goes. I was wondering why I was getting hungry. My first meal of the day doesn't usually come until noon or 1, but when I'm live streaming, I actually use quite a bit of energy chatting with you all. I just get so excited to be with you all. Okay, so, okay. Oh, I did tie it up a little while. Okay, right. So here is the finished braid. You can see it's nice and silky and shiny. So I now have 2 of these, and I probably need, I don't know, 5 or 6 more. Yeah, probably need 5 or 6 more. So we'll do that later, maybe while I'm binging some Netflix thing mindlessly, because then I can just finger loop braid. But this makes a pretty sturdy, braid actually. And this could be the kind of braid that you would see on an epaulet, right? Like in a modern military uniform. I'm actually thinking this might be thicker than I want it to be. I might have to reconsider which braid I'm using. Might be too hardy. Although it might be nice to have something with a little more body with it. Well, once I start making the reta, which I'll probably do with you, um, I can make that determination there if it's too heavy or not for my purposes. I mean, you can never have too much really nice finger loop braiding lying around. I will find a use for it, even if it doesn't end up being that, because this, for instance, this could also be used to decorate a neckline or to put edging around the sleeve, for instance, around the cuff or down here along the opening. Right, there's a lot of potential uses for this in a medieval context for trim or decoration. Yeah. Let me see, how much lace cord did you make? So that one I just made was about, looks like maybe a little over a meter. So yeah, so a little over a meter feels like, and that's about an hour's worth of work, I guess, probably. Yeah. Now, a lot of the time is setting up the loops. So the longer you can make your bows, the less, the more production you can get from per effort of setup. So yeah, that's why, this makes a good thing you can do if you're, like I have friends who are doing their graduate school, and they're doing things like Fingerloop braiding while listening to their lectures, their online lectures. That's certainly why the chat has gone away there. Huh. For some reason the chat has decided to stop showing on the thing. Okay, that's okay. We're at book corner time anyway. So definitely not a Handmaid's Tale. The Middle Ages was thankfully not a Handmaid's Tale time. Although, yeah, a lot of people do identify this as being the Handmaid's Tale, which it's sort of, I guess, but not really. Okay. Interesting. The color of butter spilled from his collar and cuffs. His doublet was sewn with brass medallions in the shape of dandelions. An ornamental gold work crawled up his high leather boots to his thighs. What is that a quote for, Asor? Or quote from what is that a quote, rather? The color of butter spilled from his collar and cuffs. That's an excellent quote. Okay, book corner time, everyone. Right. So, just to remind you, if you're interested in learning what I've just been doing, I have a tutorial on the channel. I have done some lessons in previous live streams. I taught Philip from Irish Medieval History last week, a completely basic beginner class. It's in the live streams, from the very basics of how to position your fingers. And I also do teach workshops, paid workshops and whatnot on various braids. Okay. So if you're interested, Take Five Bows Departed. This is a book that you can buy on their website. Just enter Take Five Bows Departed and go to the website, which I think is called Take Five Bows Departed or Fingerloop Braiding or something. And you can purchase this book. It has all of the interpretation of the 41 different laces that are in the original manuscript, and it has written instructions here, and it has a visual overlay of the instructions on the other page. What I am depicting here, this is a 1480s Florentine impression, and this is how a lady would dress at home. If I were to go outside, I would need to put on at least one more layer. But this was a sewing party in my private quarters, so I can dress casually for you all. Okay, so this is a book, I know I've talked about it before, but some of you may have missed that live stream. The Plantagenet Age, Everyone a Witness. This is it only focuses on England. It is a Plantagenet age. And I really wish there was a similar book for like every different, region of Europe, because this is nothing but primary source quotes. So chronicles, laws, plays, sermons, and it's, so that you can get a first-hand picture of what life was like in Plantagenet England. So, talking the 12th to the 15th century, basically. And it's broken down by category. So there's a section on health. And in the section on health, for instance, we have that section on anesthetics. And this is a sort of a kind of recipe. An ointment sleeping, a soporific ointment, with which if any man be anointed, he shall be able to suffer cutting in any place of the body without feeling or aching. Recipe contains henbane, mandrake root, hemlock, black and white poppies, opium, etc. That's great. So that's sort of in brackets. The seed of henbane alone is given in wine to drink, maketh the drinker at once for to sleep, that he shall not feel whatsoever is done to him. And proved I myself for certain. So this writer actually tried this on himself, which is pretty scientific if you ask me. And know then that it speedeth for to draw him that sleepeth so by the nose and by the cheeks and by the beard, that the spirits be quickened, that he sleep not overly deeply. Yeah, so I mentioned that thing about anesthetics. This is where I got it from, right here in this book, The Plantagenet Age. So it has a section on travel, warfare, famous people, crime and punishment, religion, clothing, work and wages, all kinds of interesting topics are covered. So The Plantagenet Age, highly recommended. Very interesting. And you can generally buy it on Abe Books for pretty inexpensively. Oh, Princess Contessa. Okay. So next, we have a series of books. This is a series by the British Museum Press, Medieval Craftsmen. So they have these by types. So there's a medieval craftsman on embroiderers. So not the embroidery itself, although that's covered a little bit, but on the embroiderers themselves, how they worked, how they were paid, their techniques. And I mean, yes, of course it shows there's lots of really fantastic depictions of embroideries in this, but it talks about the medieval technique for setting up embroidery, how we know that, who was purchasing it, how it was produced. Yeah. So Medieval Craftsman series, excellent, right? They also have one on masons and sculptors and scribes and illuminators. So the Medieval Craftsman series. So this, talks about the craftsman, the profession basically, but also it does delve into some practical aspects of each of the professions. So Medieval Craftsman series, I have scribes and illuminators, masons and sculptors, and embroiderers. I don't remember if we found out if there were others than these. Yeah, but I've gotten these. We got 2 of these at an Oxfam in Southampton for £2 each. That was a really good. That was the Oxfam bookstore, book and music store. Really good finds there. Always really good finds there. We're often there for starting and ending cruises with Cunard. Anyway, another book I can highly recommend. People think that cotton is not a medieval fiber. That's not true. It was absolutely available in medieval Europe. However, cotton cloth, like we understand it, like what we call muslin or what we call calico, that was not available in medieval Europe. But there was a massive cotton industry. So the Italian cotton industry in the later Middle Ages, 1100 to 1600. I know that sounds like such a rollicking ride, but really, if you were interested in the history of fashion, in the economics of medieval Europe, in understanding more about how the medieval economy flowed, especially with regard to the textile industry, the Italian cotton industry, really a good read. I learned so much reading this that I am now able to apply to making clothing, in 15th century Italy, for instance. So can recommend. Yeah, Oxfam is a charity shop and they have a bookstore. It's a great, we love the Oxfam bookstore in Southampton. Yep. So the cotton industry in the later Middle Ages by Maureen Fennell Matsaoui. Unfortunately, it is mirrored, so I apologize for that. Yeah. Yeah, we love Oxfam so much. Like anytime we're in Southampton, we always say there's 2 or 3 Oxfams. There's a clothing one and then the bookstore one, and I think there's a third one. We really like Oxfam. Okay. And the Oxfam bookstore in Southampton always has really rare books that are of keen interest to practitioners of medieval living history. I don't know who was there, who's donating these books, but they're pretty fun. Okay, now this one. This is in French. But with as much as I hate to admit this, as a professional translator whose job has been taken away by the machines, you can probably get through pretty okay with Google Translate or a translation app on your phone. This is a book by the École du Louvre on what we call a hennin, the pointy hat, the famous pointy princess hat, but it was not called a hennin in the medieval period. I have a video on the hennin if you want to look up and learn more about it and how to make it. But this is a must-have if you're really interested in that headdress and understanding the cultural context of the headdress. This, however, is not a practical book. This does not show you how to make one. This talks about the documentary evidence for it, about possible influences. So, grande corne et aux atours, which those are the terms. Those are the actual French terms for this hat. In English, it's probably called a mitre. we think is what we find in the account books. Also, possibly a bonnet could be one another word that was used, or sometimes there is a hornus, horn. It's sometimes just a horn because it's, pointed, right? So, grande corne et aux atours. And then in the subtitle is Le hennin et la mode au Moyen Âge, right? So it's literally it says the hennin and fashion in the Middle Ages. But this book, one of the first things it tells you is that hennin is not a medieval term. It's a 19th century Victorian term that was derived erroneously from one sermon in the 1410s, long before this style of hat even existed. So that's why it's not a hennin. Oh no, the henna. Oh, Rich, the modesty, the modesty. No, in fact, this style of headdress was referred to as the devil's headdress because it was viewed as by certain of the more tight-laced clergy as an expression of feminine wiles. And there's a lot of female demons or devils that are depicted wearing this in late 15th century art. So definitely not a modesty headdress in the least. Oh wait, or Rich, are you talking about my coif? I'm sorry, I may have missed something. If you're talking about this, the not a hennin, not a modesty headdress at all. Very is considered very sexy in its era. Again, it's sort of the difference between what we modernly think of as sexy and what 15th century people would have viewed as sexy. Yeah, no, this was referred to as a headdress of disorder by by monks in the era. So yeah. Yeah, so those are the books I have for today's book corner. And otherwise, I just have one more thing for medieval show and tell for you all. It's okay, Rich. It's cool. Thank you for joining. Rich, is this the first time you've been on my channel? I don't recall seeing you before. And at Ashwaria, I will be eating what is actually my breakfast after the live stream for certain. I actually have some lamb korma marinating the lamb for lamb korma marinating in my fridge. I make my own yogurt from scratch. Anyway, okay, so I've talked about natural dye stuffs. And I know some of you maybe have problems imagining the kinds of really amazing colors you can, in fact, in real life get with these medieval dye stuffs. So this amazing purple, this very bright color, this was achieved with cochineal, which is the New World equivalent of the Kermes louse. The Kermes louse is, as far as I know, endangered and or extinct. You can't really get it anymore. But cochineal is a louse that grows on cacti, and that was discovered by Spaniards. They discovered it from the Aztecs, and in the 16th century, like the 1520s, and they brought it back with them. And apparently, the red it produced, it had 10 times the dyeing power of Kermes, which replaced Kermes. But you can also get this amazing purple with cochineal. Now, I didn't dye this. A friend of mine here in Korea did, and I'm pretty certain she got this purple by adding iron to it, because it's the iron that turns it from red to purple. So, those of you who are wondering how bright could medieval fabrics actually be, this bright, for instance. Yeah, and this is a silk. So yeah. Oh yeah, Rich. So yes. So exactly. So this elegant ensemble was indeed an expression of femininity and grace and elegance and all of that sort of stuff. And if you think about it, so the other thing is that, and I don't know why this was the case. No one has. I have to see if any experts have come up with any brilliant ideas. Apparently, the forehead was a very attractive part of the woman in the 15th century all across Europe, not just France, England, France, Italy. I don't know why. But this style of headdress sort of frames the face and exposes the forehead. So there it is. Oh, thank you, cousin. I really appreciate this. Yeah, 1480s Italian is what this is. Florentine specifically. Remember, everyone, Europe's not a monolith in any time in the Middle Ages, and it's not a monolith even within what we would consider now a country. So Italy in the 1480s, people were dressing differently in Venice than they were in Bologna, than they were in Florence, than they were in Naples, than they were in Rome. Now, not necessarily entirely differently, but differently enough that someone from Florence would easily look at someone from Naples and say, You're from Naples. Not by their accent, but by their clothing. So this is a Florentine ensemble. Very, very quintessentially Florentine. It's very modest, right? Modest neckline. Believe it or not, by 15th century standards, this is a modest neckline. You know, it's made of a very middle class wool instead of just pretty fancy fabrics, right? Florentine women did have more elaborate gowns, but generally at home they just dressed like this. So well, welcome to my channel, Coslin. Thank you for joining. Unfortunately, you caught me at the end of this live stream, but when it posts, you can go back and watch the rest. And of course, I have tons of content, hundreds of hours of content about this sort of stuff on this channel. I've got full-length videos, very carefully researched and published and edited video essays on a wide variety of medieval living history topics. I've got dance tutorials, I've got Fingerloop crafting tutorials, hand sewing tutorials, project blogs. You can see the project vlog on how I made this exact gown. I've documented the whole process from beginning to end, and the project vlog is about 2 hours long. So you can see how this dress was made and listen to my very my very patented sense of humor. Yeah. Okay. Well, everyone, any final questions? While I let you make any final questions, I'm going to tell you what's coming up. So 24 hours from now, give or take a little bit, less than 24 hours from now, back on this channel, I will be joining up with Philip from Irish Medieval History, and we will be busting medieval myths. Tomorrow's edition is the armor and fashion edition. We'll be talking about things like knights needed to be lifted onto horses by winches. Everyone was dirty. Everyone wore drab colors. We'll be talking about the kilt and how it's not a medieval fashion at all. So join us for our myth busting series, and we will of course be taking questions and comments from you all. Oh gosh, Elena, I'm so sorry. I missed you. I wondered where you were. Well, maybe you can watch the recording. It's not the same thing. Let me see. While I was in England, did I visit the Buckfast Brewery? I did not. I've actually spent a lot of time in England over the last 20 years in and about. Where is the Buckfast Brewery? I will admit I'm personally not a beer person or an ale person or a fermented grain person. In general, I guess I do enjoy makgeolli though, I will admit, but it's more like fizzy rice juice than real alcohol. Yeah. Oh yeah, I'm sorry, Elena, but I guess you can watch the recording. But yeah, it's going on 3.5 hours. So yeah, don't forget to hit that notification bell and make sure that all notifications are clicked, because I do random live streams as I'm going about my day sometimes if I'm working on something and think you all might find it interesting. Sometimes I'll take you on walks with me. So yeah, otherwise I hope to see you all in a little under 24 hours at the latest for my medieval myth busting session with Philip. Yeah, I know it's not the same as watching a recording. I figured you meant hugs, Alina. I didn't think you meant, I don't even know what that word is. Actually, now that I look at it, my brain filled in the blank for you. Otherwise, I thank all my patrons and channel members and all of those of you who've been so generous to contribute in the super chat today. I really appreciate your faith in me, and that you appreciate what I do so much that you're willing to go that extra mile. I also appreciate all of you really loyal supporters who are always hitting the thumbs up, always leaving an emoji, always leaving a comment on every single last thing. Susan, you know who you are. I really appreciate you all. Thank you so much. And this is a weekly thing. I do this at least every Saturday morning, my time, every Friday evening, most everyone else's time, unless you're in Europe or Asia, then it's Saturday morning for you. Every week, it's a weekly show. So I hope to see you all at the next one. Oh, Mo MLN, thank you. It is an interesting concept. It seems to be pretty popular. So I hope to see you at the next one, everyone. Really appreciate you all. And if you have any questions and I didn't answer them during the live chat, just pop them in the comment section under the video. As many of you know, I'm really on top of the comments. So if you have questions, just pop them there and I will get to them. Okay, everyone. Otherwise, have a wonderfully creative weekend. And until the next time, guys, bye, everyone. And we'll see.